As I lay in the ICU fighting for my life, I received a text from my mother. "We can't help you financially. You chose an expensive hospital. You're on your own." After 7 years of emptying my savings to pay for my brother's life-saving treatments, this was their response to my crisis. What they didn't know was that all those years I'd been supporting my brother, I'd been quietly building a second emergency fund that my family knew nothing about. By the time they realized what had happened, I was recovering in a beautiful apartment, in another state, while they scrambled to explain their betrayal to everyone who knew us. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was always the responsible one in the family, the oldest. Of 3 siblings, I learned early to look after my younger brother Ethan and sister Natalie while our parents worked long hours at their small family restaurant. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough. A modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Minneapolis, public school education, and the occasional family vacation to visit relatives in Chicago. "Sarah," my mother would say, "we're counting on you to set an example." And I did. I studied hard, earned scholarships, and became the first in our family to graduate from college with a business degree. While other 20-somethings were traveling or pursuing dream careers in expensive cities, I chose a stable accounting job at a mid-sized firm just 30 minutes from my parents' home. "Family comes first," my father would remind us at every holiday gathering, raising his glass in a toast that had become our family mantra. "Without each other, we have nothing." I believed those words with my whole heart. So when Ethan was diagnosed with a rare kidney disease at 24, just as he was finishing his associate's degree, I didn't hesitate to step up. The diagnosis came during a routine physical. Ethan had been feeling unusually tired for months, but we'd all attributed it to his busy schedule, working part-time while attending community college. The doctor noticed protein in his urine, ordered more tests, and suddenly our family was thrown into the terrifying world of specialist appointments, treatment options, and staggering medical bills. "It's focal segmental glomerulosclerosis," the specialist explained, using a term none of us had ever heard before. FSGS for short. It causes scarring in the kidney filters, which can eventually lead to kidney failure. My parents sat stunned in the doctor's office, my mother clutching Ethan's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Natalie, who was still in her final year of high school, cried silently in the corner chair. I immediately pulled out a notebook and began taking detailed notes, asking questions about treatment options, success rates, and long-term prognosis. "Will he need a transplant?" I asked, watching the doctor's face carefully. "Eventually, that may be necessary," he acknowledged. "But first, we'll try medications to slow the progression of the disease and manage symptoms." As we left the hospital that day, I noticed my parents whispering anxiously to each other. Later that night, I overheard them at the kitchen table, voices tight with worry as they discussed finances. "The insurance will only cover 60%, my father said, his voice uncharacteristically shaky as he reviewed the paperwork. "The co-pays alone will be hundreds each month, not counting the special diet he'll need." "Maybe we could get a second mortgage," my mother suggested, though her tone betrayed her doubt. The restaurant had been struggling for years, barely, providing enough to cover our basic expenses. I stood in the hallway listening, a decision forming in my mind. The next morning, I transferred $5,000 from my savings account to my checking account and made an appointment with my parents. "I want to help with Ethan's medical expenses," I told them, sliding a check across the table. "This should cover the immediate costs, and I can contribute $800 monthly going forward." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, we can't accept this. You've worked so hard for your savings. What's the point of saving if not for emergencies like this?" I countered. "Besides, my company just gave me a promotion. I can afford it." This wasn't entirely true. The promotion had come with only a modest raise, and $800 monthly would require significant sacrifices. But seeing the relief wash over my parents' faces, I knew I'd made the right decision. "You've always been our rock," my father said, embracing me. "We'll pay you back someday, I promise." What began as a temporary arrangement gradually became our new normal. Ethan's condition stabilized with treatment, but never improved enough to come off the expensive medications. The promised someday of repayment was never mentioned again, and I never brought it up. After all, this was my brother's health. How could I put a price on that? Meanwhile, I adjusted my lifestyle to accommodate the financial strain. While friends bought homes and took international vacations, I remained in my modest one-bedroom apartment, drove my 10-year-old car, and became an expert at finding free or low-cost entertainment options. The only luxury I allowed myself was continuing to build an emergency savings fund. Smaller contributions now, but regular ones. A financial advisor had once told me never to keep all my savings in one place, so I opened a separate account at a different bank, one that my family didn't know about. Just for true emergencies, I told myself, transferring a small amount each month, just in case. 3 years into Ethan's treatment, the disease progressed despite the medications. His kidney function declined to the point where transplant became the only viable long-term solution. I immediately volunteered to be tested as a donor. "Are you sure?" Natalie asked when I announced my decision at a family dinner. She had just graduated college and started her first job in Chicago. "It's major surgery, Sarah, and the recovery time." "I've already looked into it," I assured her, having researched everything from surgical risks to recovery timelines. "I can work remotely during recovery, and I have enough sick leave saved up." To everyone's relief, I was a match. The surgery was scheduled, and I added medical power of attorney paperwork to my growing file of important documents. Throughout the pre-surgical appointments, my parents focused entirely on Ethan, which I understood. He was, after all, the one facing a chronic illness. If they sometimes forgot to ask how I was feeling about donating an organ, well, that was understandable too. The transplant was successful. I recovered slowly but steadily, taking 6 weeks off work, 2 weeks longer than I'd planned, which meant 2 weeks of unpaid leave. My known savings took another hit, but I considered it worthwhile when I saw color returning to Ethan's cheeks, energy animating his movements again. "You saved my life," he told me, hugging me carefully to avoid hurting my still healing incision. "I'll never forget this, Sarah. Never." For a while, things improved. Ethan returned to school, determined to finish his degree now that he had a functioning kidney. The medical bills decreased, though they didn't disappear entirely. Anti-rejection medications would be a lifelong expense. I continued to help, though I reduced my monthly contribution to $500. Then, 4 years after the transplant, Ethan developed complications. His body was showing signs of rejecting the kidney, requiring a new regimen of expensive medications and frequent hospital stays. Once again, I increased my financial support, now sending $1,000 monthly to my parents to help cover the costs. "You're an angel," my mother would say, accepting the checks without question. "We couldn't manage without you." By this point, 7 years had passed since Ethan's initial diagnosis. I was 34 years old, still single, still living in the same apartment, still driving the same car, now 17 years old and increasingly unreliable. My visible savings had dwindled to less than $10,000, but my secret fund had grown to just over $40,000. Not enough for retirement, certainly, but enough to provide some security in an emergency. I never expected that emergency to arrive on an ordinary Tuesday morning as I walked from my car to my office building. The headache that had been bothering me for days suddenly intensified, my vision blurred, and the ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I remember reaching for my phone, pressing the emergency contact button, And then nothing until I woke up in the ICU 2 days later. You had a brain aneurysm, the neurosurgeon explained when I was finally lucid enough to understand. We performed emergency surgery. You're very lucky your colleague found you so quickly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As the fog of medication cleared, I began to process the seriousness of my condition. A subarachnoid hemorrhage, bleeding in the brain, that could have killed me. Would have killed me if I hadn't received immediate treatment. The surgeon explained the road ahead. Weeks in the hospital, months of rehabilitation, potential cognitive and physical therapy. What about work? I asked, immediately thinking of my financial obligations. How long will I be out? At least 3 months, he replied, his expression serious. Possibly longer. This isn't something you can rush, Ms. Reynolds. Your brain needs time to heal. 3 months without income. Even with my health insurance, the out-of-pocket maximum would deplete most of my visible savings. And then there were the ongoing expenses, rent, utilities, car payment, and of course Ethan's monthly support. When my parents finally arrived at the hospital that evening, their faces etched with worry, I felt a wave of relief. Finally, I wasn't facing a crisis alone. We would figure this out together, as a family. After all, hadn't my father always said, "Family comes first"? But as they stood awkwardly at the foot of my hospital bed, something in their demeanor made my heart sink. They asked about my condition, made appropriate noises of concern, but seemed distracted, uncomfortable. The thing is, my father finally said, clearing his throat, Ethan's having some issues with the kidney again. We've had to increase his medications, and there are some new treatments the doctor wants to try. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, genuinely concerned for my brother despite my own situation. Is he going to be okay? We hope so, with the right care, my mother replied, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. But it's expensive, Sarah. The new treatment protocol. It's not well covered by insurance. I waited, the silence stretching between us. Were they really going to ask what I thought they were going to ask? Even now, as I lay in an ICU bed with my head wrapped in bandages? We hate to bring this up, my father continued, avoiding my eyes. But we were wondering, if you could still help with Ethan's expenses? Just until we get through this rough patch. The monitor beside my bed registered my increasing heart rate, causing a nurse to glance through the glass partition with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Dad, I just had brain surgery, I said slowly, making sure they understood the gravity of my condition. I'll be out of work for months. I don't know if I can afford my own medical bills, let alone continue supporting Ethan. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Disappointment? Frustration? Whatever it wasn't the understanding and support I desperately needed. We understand, my mother said finally, though her tone suggested the opposite. We just thought, well, you've always been so responsible with money. We assumed you'd have substantial savings for emergencies like this. I did, I replied, a edge creeping into my voice despite my effort to remain calm. I've been using those savings to help Ethan for the past 7 years. Another uncomfortable silence filled the room. My father checked his watch surreptitiously. We should let you rest, he said, gathering his coat. The doctor said not to tire you out. We'll come back tomorrow. But they didn't come back the next day, or the day after. When I called, my mother answered with excuses. They were busy with Ethan's appointments. The restaurant needed attention. They'd visit soon. 5 days after my surgery, as I was being transferred from the ICU to a regular room, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother, and it would change everything about how I viewed my family. We've looked at your hospital. It's one of the most expensive in the city. We can't help you financially. You chose an expensive hospital. You're on your own. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the message, certain I must be misunderstanding. You're on your own. The words seemed to float off the screen, mocking 7 years of sacrifice, thousands of dollars in support, and the literal gift of my kidney. That's when I knew. It was time to access my hidden fortune and reclaim my life. I stared at my mother's text message until the screen dimmed, then went black. My trembling finger tapped it awake again. The words remained unchanged. You're on your own. The hospital room suddenly felt colder. The rhythmic beeping of monitors that had faded into background noise now seemed to grow louder, emphasizing my isolation with each electronic pulse. 7 years of supporting my brother without complaint. 7 years of family comes first mantras at every holiday, and this was what it amounted to, abandoned when I needed them most. Nurse Diane entered the room for her regular check, immediately, noticing my distress. My vitals had spiked, triggering an alert at the nurse's station. "Everything okay, Sarah?" she asked, genuine concern in her eyes as she adjusted my IV line. I handed her my phone, unable to speak the words aloud. Her eyes narrowed as she read the message, her professional composure momentarily slipping to reveal indignation on my behalf. "Well," she said, handing the phone back and straightening my blankets with more force than necessary. "Family can be complicated. But right now, your only job is to focus on healing, not on people who don't deserve your energy." She was right, of course, but the practical wisdom did little to ease the profound sense of betrayal washing over me. After Diane left, I lay back against the hospital pillows, forcing myself to think logically despite the emotional storm and lingering effects of anesthesia. My situation was precarious, but not hopeless. I had health insurance through my employer. Good. Coverage, though, with a $6,000 out-of-pocket maximum that would deplete my visible savings. Short-term disability would cover 60% of my salary after a 2-week waiting period, but that wouldn't be enough to maintain my regular expenses plus the $1,000 monthly support I'd been sending for Ethan. Then there was the matter of recovery. The doctors had made it clear I couldn't live alone during the initial weeks after discharge. I'd need help with basic tasks, transportation to follow-up appointments, someone to monitor for complications. I'd always assumed my family would step up, just as I had for Ethan. A text alert interrupted my calculations. This one from my sister Natalie. "Heard about your situation. So sorry. Wish I could help, but just signed lease on new apartment and money's tight. Love you." No offer to visit. No mention of providing the care I would need. Just another digital abandonment wrapped in flimsy excuses. Natalie had been living in Chicago for the past 5 years, building her career in marketing. She'd visited home regularly, but rarely contributed to Ethan's expenses beyond the occasional small check on his birthday. I'd never resented this. She was building her life, and I was in a better financial position to help. But now, the absence of even an offer of assistance stung sharply. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted by more than just my physical condition. When I opened them again, the room was darker, evening having arrived while I dozed. My phone showed 3 missed calls from work, but nothing from my parents or siblings. The rejection was absolute. That night, as the hospital settled into its quieter rhythms, I made my first decision. I would stop sending money for Ethan's treatments, effective immediately. The automatic transfer scheduled for the following week would be canceled. The choice brought no satisfaction, only a hollow necessity. My second decision was harder, but equally clear. I could no longer count on the people who should have been my support system, which meant I needed to create a new one, quickly. With shaking hands, I opened the banking app on my phone, not my primary account, which was nearly depleted, but the secondary account at Regional Trust Bank, the one my family knew nothing about. The balance reflected years of disciplined saving, $43,182. 19. My hidden fortune, accumulated through small, consistent deposits and careful investing, even while supporting Ethan. It wasn't enough for long-term security, but it was enough to give me options now, when I most needed them. Morning rounds brought Dr. Patel, the neurosurgeon who had saved my life. She reviewed my chart, checked my cognitive responses, and seemed satisfied with my progress. "We'll need to discuss discharge planning," she said, making notes in my electronic chart. "You'll need supervision for at least 3 weeks post-discharge. Do you have family who can stay with you?" The question landed like a blow. "No," I replied, working to keep my voice steady. "No family available." Dr. Patel looked up, surprised. "Friends who might be able to help? It's really not safe for you to be alone during the initial recovery period." I thought about my social circle, which had gradually shrunk over the years, as I focused on work and family obligations. I had colleagues I was friendly with, but no one close enough to ask for this level of help. "I'll need to make other arrangements," I said vaguely. Dr. Patel frowned, clearly concerned. "The hospital has a social worker who can discuss options with you. Some patients go to short-term rehabilitation facilities until they're ready to be independent again." The idea of a rehabilitation facility depressed me, but I nodded agreement. "That would be helpful, thank you." After Dr. Patel left, I turned to my phone again, this time opening my contacts list. If family wouldn't help me, perhaps there were other connections I could rely on. I scrolled past names of colleagues and acquaintances until I reached Valerie Gardner. We'd been close friends in college, even roommates for 2 years, before life and geography gradually separated us. The last I'd heard, Val had moved to Phoenix after her divorce 3 years ago. We still exchanged birthday texts and occasional social media comments, but hadn't had a real conversation in at least a year. Yet Val had always been the person I'd trust with anything. Before my family's betrayal crushed my ability to trust at all. Before I could reconsider, I pressed the call button. To my surprise, she answered on the second ring. "Sarah, is everything okay? You never call in the middle of a workday." The sound of her familiar voice, genuinely concerned without even knowing the situation, broke something inside me. For the first time since waking up in the ICU, I allowed myself to cry. "No," I managed between sobs. "Everything's not okay." In halting sentences, I explained my situation, the aneurysm, the surgery, my family's abandonment. Val listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of outrage at particularly egregious details. "Those absolute bastards," she said when I finished, her voice tight with anger. "After everything you've done for them?" "I don't know what to do," I admitted, the confession painful. "I can't go home without help, but I don't have anyone to ask." There was a pause, and I could almost see Val's expression as she processed everything I'd shared. "Yes, you do," she said finally, her tone shifting from anger to determination. "You have me." "Val, you're in Phoenix. I couldn't ask." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Actually, no, I'm insisting." The firmness in her voice brooked no argument. "I work remotely now, so I can do my job from anywhere. I have plenty of vacation time saved, too. But your life, your apartment?" "My lease is month to month. And frankly, I've been thinking about a change anyway. Sarah, this isn't even a question. You were there for me during my divorce when I couldn't even get out of bed some days. Now I'm going to be there for you." The relief that washed over me was so profound it felt physical, like cool water on a burn. For the first time since reading my mother's text, I felt a flicker of hope. "I don't even know what to say," I managed. "Say you'll let me help you figure this out. We'll make a plan, just like we used to for finals week. Remember our color-coded study schedules?" I laughed, despite everything. remembering the elaborate planning systems we'd created in college. How could I forget? You had 15 different highlighters. And you had the multicolored sticky notes, she countered, and for a moment, it was as if the years between us dissolved. The conversation that followed was practical and grounding. Val would fly to Minneapolis in 3 days, in time to help coordinate my discharge. She'd stay in my apartment initially, helping me navigate the first critical weeks of recovery. And then, she said, a hint of conspiracy in her voice, we should talk about what comes next. Because honestly, Sarah, maybe this is the universe, telling you it's time for a fresh start, away from people who don't deserve you. After we hung up, a hospital social worker named Brandon arrived to discuss discharge planning. I explained that a friend would be coming to help me, and he seemed relieved. That's excellent news, he said, making notes in my file. We'll coordinate with her on your care needs and follow-up appointments. But there's something else I wanted to discuss with you. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Your colleague who found you, Lauren, I believe, mentioned that you've been supporting your brother financially for years. She was concerned about your situation and wanted to make sure we addressed any financial anxieties that might impact your recovery. I felt a flush of embarrassment that my personal financial situation was being discussed, but also a flicker of gratitude that someone had been concerned enough to mention it. It's a complicated situation, I acknowledged. Brandon nodded understandingly. Recovery is about more than physical healing. Financial stress can significantly impact health outcomes. There are resources available that might help: assistance programs, medical bill negotiation services, even legal aid if you're facing employment issues due to your condition. For the next hour, Brandon outlined options I hadn't known existed. By the time he left, I had a folder of information and, more importantly, a growing sense that I wasn't as alone as my family had made me feel. That evening, I opened my laptop with newfound determination. First, I wrote an email to my company's HR department, formally requesting my short-term disability benefits and inquiring about the possibility of working remotely during my recovery period. Then I logged into my banking app again and made a significant decision. I transferred $20,000 from my secret account to a new account at a different bank entirely, creating a further layer of security that my family couldn't possibly discover. As I completed the transfer, my phone buzzed with a text. I tensed, expecting another dismissive message from my family. Instead, it was Val. Just booked my flight, arriving Thursday at 2 p.m. We'll get through this together, just like we got through Professor Wilson's impossible statistics class. Love you. For the first time since awakening in the ICU, I felt something beyond betrayal and uncertainty. It wasn't quite hope yet, but perhaps its precursor. Possibility. My family had abandoned me, but perhaps that abandonment was also liberation. From obligation, from one-sided sacrifice, from relationships that took but never gave. As I drifted toward sleep that night, my mother's cruel words, "You're on your own," echoed in my mind. But now they felt less like a sentence and more like a starting point. Yes, I was on my own. And perhaps that was exactly where I needed to be to finally put myself first. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was picking at the bland hospital breakfast when a knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up expecting to see a nurse or doctor, but instead found my brother Ethan standing awkwardly in the doorway, a small potted plant clutched in his hands. "Hey," he said softly, hovering at the threshold as if uncertain of his welcome. In the 7 years since his diagnosis, Ethan had aged beyond his 31 years. His face carried a perpetual pallor, his frame thin despite the steroids that were part of his anti-rejection regimen. The kidney I had given him had extended, his life improved its quality immeasurably, but the ongoing battle against rejection had taken its toll. "Hey," I replied, carefully keeping my voice neutral. "This is a surprise." He approached the bed slowly, placing the plant on the bedside table. Mom said you had surgery. I wanted to see how you were doing. Did Mom also tell you they've decided not to help me? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Ethan winced, looking down at his hands. She mentioned that finances are tight right now because of my new treatment protocol. That's one way of putting it. I gestured to the chair beside the bed, deciding to hear him out despite the anger simmering just below the surface. How much did they tell you about my condition? Not much, just that you collapsed at work and needed brain surgery. He sat, his movements cautious as if afraid of triggering my displeasure. It sounds really serious, Sarah. It was a subarachnoid hemorrhage caused by an aneurysm, I explained clinically. Essentially, a blood vessel in my brain burst. I could have died if Lauren hadn't found me quickly and called 911. Ethan paled further, if that was possible. God, Sarah, I had no idea it was that serious. Well, now you know. I pushed away the breakfast tray, my already minimal appetite completely gone. So what brings you here, Ethan? Because if you're hoping I'll continue sending money for your treatments, I'm afraid that won't be possible anymore. He looked genuinely shocked. That's not why I came. I just wanted to see you, to make sure you were okay. Part of me wanted to believe him. This was Ethan, after all. My little brother who had collected caterpillars with me in the backyard, who had cried when I left for college, who had once been my fierce defender against schoolyard bullies before illness had weakened his body, but not his spirit. Yet another part of me, the part still raw from my parents' abandonment, couldn't help wondering if his visit had been orchestrated to ensure I wouldn't completely cut off financial support. Did Mom send you? I asked bluntly. He hesitated just a fraction too long before answering. No, I decided to come on my own. The lie, small but unmistakable, cut deeper than I expected. Ethan, please don't. Not now. Not after everything. His shoulders slumped. Okay, yes, she suggested I visit. But I wanted to come anyway, Sarah. You're my sister. You gave me your kidney, for God's sake. And yet, when I needed help, when I needed family to support me through my recovery, all of you disappeared. The words emerged sharper than intended, fueled by hurt and betrayal. Mom actually texted me that I was on my own. She shouldn't have said that, Ethan admitted, running a hand through his thinning hair. But you have to understand, they're scared. The new treatment is experimental, insurance barely covers any of it, and the restaurant is barely breaking. Even. And I've been subsidizing your medical care for 7 years, I replied. I've never complained, never asked for anything in return. Until now. When I need help, and suddenly there's nothing available for me. What do you want me to say, Sarah? That it's not fair? Of course it's not fair. None of this is fair. His voice rose slightly, a rare display of emotion from my typically reserved brother. It's not fair that I got sick. It's not fair that you had to help so much. And it's not fair that now, when you need help, we can't give it. Can't? Or won't? The distinction felt important somehow. He looked away, unwilling or unable to answer directly. What are you going to do now? He asked instead. About your recovery? I considered how much to reveal. Ethan had always been caught in the middle, the recipient of help he needed but didn't ask for, the son my parents prioritized, the brother who benefited from my sacrifice, but had little say in the family dynamics that shaped our relationship. I'm making arrangements, I said finally. A friend is coming to help me during initial recovery. After that, I haven't decided. Relief visibly washed over him, and I realized he had been worried about me, genuinely concerned about my welfare even if he wasn't in a position to offer assistance. That's good, he said. I'm glad you won't be alone. No thanks to our family, I couldn't help adding. Ethan sighed, his face showing the complex emotions of someone caught between loyalty to parents and love for a sibling. "Sarah, I wish things were different. I wish I could help you the way you've helped me. But I don't have any money of my own, and my health isn't good enough to provide the care you'll need." "I know," I softened slightly, remembering that Ethan was as much a victim of circumstance as I was, perhaps more so. "I don't blame you for getting sick, Ethan. I've never regretted helping you, but I can't pretend I'm not hurt by how everyone has responded to my crisis." He nodded, accepting the criticism without defense. For what it's worth, I tried to convince them to help. I even offered to postpone my next treatment cycle to free up some funds. This surprised me. "You did?" "Of course I did. You're my sister. My only sister who gave me a literal part of herself." He managed a small, sad smile. "But Dad said postponing treatment wasn't an option, that my health had to be the priority." The familiar refrain echoed in my head. Ethan's health as the family priority, superseding all other concerns, including my own well-being. For years, I had accepted this hierarchy of needs without question. Now, lying in a hospital bed after nearly dying, the inherent unfairness of it struck me with full force. "I appreciate you trying," I said, meaning it despite everything. "But I think this situation has made something very clear to me, Ethan. I've spent years putting everyone else first, especially you, and when I finally needed someone to put me first, no one did, not even for a little while." "I would if I could," he insisted, and I believed him. Ethan had a good heart. He always had. He was simply trapped in a family system that had designated him the perpetual recipient of care, and me, the perpetual provider. "I know." I reached out to squeeze his hand briefly. "But the reality is, you can't. And that means I need to make decisions based on what's best for me now, starting with stopping the monthly payments I've been sending." He nodded, having already accepted this inevitability. "I understand. You need to focus on your recovery." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 7 years of interconnected fate hanging between us. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "What about afterward, after you recover?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean? Will you come back home? Continue at your job? Go back to how things were before?" I hadn't fully formed a plan beyond immediate recovery, but Ethan's questions crystallized something that had been forming in my subconscious since receiving my mother's text. "No," I said, the certainty of the answer surprising even me. "I don't think I can go back to how things were before. Too much has changed." "Because of what Mom and Dad did?" "Partly, but also because this experience has made me realize something important." I gestured to the hospital room around us. "Life is fragile, Ethan. I could have died without ever having lived for myself. I've been so focused on helping everyone else that I never prioritized my own dreams." "What are your dreams?" he asked quietly, and the simple question nearly broke me because I realized no one in my family had ever asked me that before. "I'm not entirely sure yet," I admitted. "But I think I need to find out. And I don't think I can do that here, surrounded by the same obligations and expectations." Ethan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You're thinking of leaving Minneapolis?" "Maybe. I haven't decided anything concrete yet. But yes, I'm considering a fresh start somewhere else." To my surprise, instead of protesting, Ethan nodded, slowly. "Maybe that would be good for you. You deserve a chance to live your own life, Sarah." The validation from the person who had benefited most from my sacrifice touched something deep within me. Tears welled in my eyes, the first I'd allowed myself to shed in Ethan's presence. "Thank you for saying that," I managed. "I mean it," he insisted, his own eyes glistening. "And I want you to know something else. Whatever happens with Mom and Dad, whatever you decide to do or where you decide to go, You'll always be my sister, the person who saved my life. I won't forget that, even if I can't repay it." His words weren't a solution to my immediate problems, nor did they erase the hurt of my parents' abandonment. But they offered a small measure of healing, an acknowledgement of my worth beyond what I could provide financially. After Ethan left, promising to visit again before my discharge if he felt well enough, I found myself in a contemplative mood. The conversation had shifted something within me, transforming nebulous thoughts of change into more concrete possibilities. I opened my laptop and began researching. First, the logistics of breaking my apartment lease due to medical necessity. Then, the job market for accountants in Phoenix, where Val lived. Property rental costs. Climate considerations for someone recovering from brain surgery. Each search, each tab opened, felt like an act of reclamation, taking back control of a life that had, for too long, been directed by others' needs. For the first time, I was considering possibilities based solely on what I wanted, what would make me happy, what would help me heal, not just physically, but emotionally. When Dr. Patel arrived for afternoon rounds, she noticed the change immediately. "You look better today," she commented, checking my neurological responses. "More focused." "I feel more focused," I agreed. "I've been making plans." "Good plans, I hope. Restful recovery plans?" Her tone was gently chiding. The concern of a doctor worried her patient might push too hard too soon. "Plans that will help me heal in every way," I assured her, including getting away from some unhealthy relationships. She nodded approvingly. "The brain needs positive emotions to heal properly. Stress, anxiety, resentment, these can actually slow recovery. Whatever brings you peace and purpose is good medicine right now." Peace and purpose. The words resonated, offering a framework for the decisions ahead. What would bring me peace after years of stressful obligation? What purpose might I find? Beyond being my family's financial support system? I didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time since waking up in the ICU, I felt a sense of agency. My family's abandonment had left me adrift, but perhaps it had also cut ties that had been binding me to a life too small for my spirit. That evening, I composed an email to my supervisor at work, requesting a meeting to discuss my employment options. Not just the immediate disability leave, but longer-term possibilities: remote work, transfer to another office, perhaps even a different role within the company. Options that would have seemed unthinkably disruptive before my aneurysm now felt like necessary steps toward self-preservation. As I sent the email, I realized I was doing exactly what my mother had accused me of. I was putting myself first. The difference was, after 7 years of putting everyone else first without complaint, I had earned that right, and I intended to exercise it fully. Thursday arrived with a flurry of activity. My condition had improved enough that Dr. Patel was discussing discharge plans for early next week, pending final tests and arrangements for at-home care. The hospital's social worker, Brandon, had visited again, bringing paperwork for various support services and providing reassurance about navigating insurance claims. But the most significant event was Val's arrival. When she appeared in my doorway that afternoon, her vibrant presence immediately transformed the sterile hospital room. Her curly red hair was shorter than I remembered, and new laugh lines framed her eyes, but her trademark energetic warmth was unchanged. "Look at you," she said, dropping her carry-on bag and rushing to embrace me carefully, mindful of the IV line and monitoring equipment. Still the most organized patient in the entire hospital, I bet. She gestured to my neatly arranged laptop, notebooks, and medication schedule I'd created. "Some things never change," I admitted, grateful for her familiar teasing. "Thank you for coming, Val. I still can't believe you dropped everything." "Stop." She held up a hand. "We're not doing the guilt thing. You would have done the same for me. Actually, you did do the same for me during the divorce apocalypse, remember?" I smiled. remembering the week I'd taken off work to help Val move out of her marital home after discovering her husband's infidelity. That was different. We lived in the same city then. Well, now we might again. She settled into the visitor's chair, kicking off her shoes and tucking her feet beneath her. The same casual posture from our college days. I've been thinking about relocating anyway. Phoenix is beautiful, but it's not home. And Minneapolis is? I asked, surprised. Val had grown up in Oregon, only coming to Minnesota for college. She shrugged. Home is where you make it. And right now, I'm making it wherever my best friend needs me to be. The simple declaration of loyalty, so at odds with my family's abandonment, filled my eyes with tears. Val, ever perceptive, immediately reached for the tissue box and handed it to me. None of that, she said gently. We've got too much planning to do for weepy reunions. Now, tell me everything the doctors have said about your recovery needs. For the next hour, we discussed practical matters, medication schedules, follow-up appointments, physical restrictions during recovery. Val took detailed notes, occasionally interrupting with clarifying questions or suggestions. I've been looking at your apartment online, she said, consulting her phone. 3rd floor, no elevator. That's not going to work initially. Stairs will be off limits for at least the first couple weeks, right? I nodded, having already recognized this challenge. The social worker suggested short-term rental options with better accessibility. I've got a better idea, Val said, her eyes sparkling with the look I recognized from college, the one that preceded her most brilliant or most disastrous inspirations. Let's not rent anything in Minneapolis. Let's get you out of here entirely. What do you mean? Phoenix, she said simply. Come back with me. My place has 2 bedrooms, it's all 1 level, and the complex has accessible features throughout. Plus, I know all the best doctors and can get recommendations for your follow-up care. The suggestion was so unexpected, yet so perfectly aligned with my emerging thoughts of starting fresh, that I was momentarily speechless. I know it sounds impulsive, Val continued, misinterpreting my silence as hesitation. But think about it logically. You need a place to recover that's accessible and where you'll have support. You've been considering a change anyway. And most importantly, you need distance from the people who abandoned you when you needed them most. I can't just leave, I protested weakly, though the idea had already taken root in my imagination. My job, my apartment, all my things. All manageable problems, she countered. Your job already has remote workers. I checked their website. Your lease likely has medical exemption clauses, and belongings can be shipped or stored. My practical mind immediately began cataloging obstacles and solutions, a familiar exercise from my accounting work. What about my follow-up care, insurance networks? You have national coverage through your company plan, Val reminded me. I already looked into it. Of course she had. Val had always been thorough, especially when advocating for someone she cared about. You've thought of everything, I said, slightly overwhelmed by how quickly she was dismantling my objections. Not everything, she admitted, but enough to know this is doable, and potentially the best thing for your recovery, physical and emotional. The idea continued to unfold in my mind, revealing new possibilities with each moment. Distance from my family. A fresh environment without painful associations. A support system in Val. Climate advantages for recovery in Arizona's dry warmth versus Minnesota's approaching winter. Let me think about it, I said finally. It's a big decision. Val nodded, respecting my need to process. Of course, no pressure. But while you're thinking... She pulled out her tablet and opened a real estate app. Here are some photos of my place so you can see what you'd be getting into. As she scrolled through images of her sun-filled apartment with its desert modern aesthetic and views of distant mountains, a notification popped up on my phone. An email from my HR director, Marjorie, responding to my inquiry about remote work possibilities. The message was brief, but clear. Sarah, so sorry to hear about your health crisis. Remote work is certainly possible for your role. Let's discuss timing and logistics when you're feeling better. Take care of yourself. That's the priority now. It felt like a sign, a door opening just as I was considering whether to walk through. I showed the email to Val, whose smile widened. See? The universe is conspiring in your favor. Before I could respond, a nurse entered to check my vitals and administer medication. As she worked, she chatted casually with Val, who explained, she was a friend helping with discharge planning. You're lucky to have such good friends, the nurse commented to me. Family is great, but friends really step up when it counts. The words, though kindly meant, struck a painful chord. Val must have noticed because she smoothly changed the subject, asking the nurse about recommended local pharmacies for my post-discharge medications. After the nurse left, Val turned to me with a determined expression. There's something else we need to discuss. Your finances. My body tensed involuntarily. Money had been such a source of strain for so long that the topic itself now triggered anxiety. I'm not asking for details you don't want to share, Val clarified quickly. But brain surgery, hospital stays, rehabilitation, it's expensive, even with insurance. And now that you've stopped supporting your brother, we need to make sure you're really okay financially. The concern was legitimate. Even with insurance covering most of the major expenses, the out-of-pocket costs would be substantial. Add in potential lost income during recovery, and the financial picture could quickly become precarious. I have savings, I said carefully, not just what my family knew about. I've been maintaining a separate emergency fund for years. Val's eyebrows rose. Smart. How much are we talking about? About 40,000, I admitted. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to get through this crisis and potentially fund a fresh start. 40,000 is impressive, considering what you've been sending home all these years, Val said, visibly relieved. That definitely gives you options. Just then, my phone rang, my parents' number appearing on the screen. I stared at it, my heart rate accelerating enough that the monitor beside me registered the change. Val noticed my reaction. You don't have to answer that. No, I think I should. I took a steadying breath and accepted the call, putting it on speaker so Val could hear. Hello? Sarah, it's Mom. Her voice sounded strained, lacking its usual authority. How are you feeling? The casual concern, as if she hadn't essentially abandoned me via text message days earlier, was breathtaking in its audacity. I'm recovering, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The doctors are pleased with my progress. That's good, that's good. An awkward pause followed. Listen, your father and I have been talking. We feel terrible about how things have been handled. Val made a derisive face across from me, mouthing what looked like, they should feel terrible. I suppressed a smile despite the tension. Do you? I asked, not making it easier for her. Of course we do, Sarah. You're our daughter. We care about you deeply. The words sounded rehearsed, lacking genuine emotion. I waited, suspecting there was more to this sudden outreach. The thing is, she continued when I didn't respond. Ethan's specialist called yesterday. The new treatment protocol isn't working as well as they'd hoped. They're recommending a more aggressive approach, but it's going to be significantly more expensive. And there it was, the real reason for the call. Not concern for my health, but concern for their financial pipeline. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it despite everything. Ethan's health struggles were real and deserved compassion. I hope they can find an effective treatment. Yes, well, my mother continued, her voice taking on the cajoling tone she used when asking for favors. We were wondering if you might reconsider your decision to stop the monthly support, just temporarily, until we can figure out other options. Val's expression darkened with each word, her protective instincts clearly triggered. I felt strangely calm, however, a clarity settling over me that had been missing in previous interactions with my family. "Mom," I said gently but firmly, "I nearly died last week. I'm facing months of recovery and thousands in medical bills. I simply don't have the financial capacity to support Ethan anymore." "But surely your insurance is covering most of your expenses," she pressed. "And you've always been so good with money, Sarah. You must have savings set aside." The presumption was stunning, that even after abandoning me in my greatest moment of need, they still felt entitled to my resources. "My insurance has an out-of-pocket maximum of $6,000, I explained, as if to a client who didn't understand financial realities. "Yes, I have savings. That savings is now earmarked for my recovery and rehabilitation. But Ethan's situation is life-threatening," she countered, a note of desperation entering her voice. "Your father and I have already remortgaged the house. We've cut every expense we can. Without your help, I don't know what we'll do." For 7 years, this plea would have worked on me. The implicit guilt trip, the reminder of Ethan's precarious health, the suggestion that without my help, terrible consequences would follow. But something had fundamentally shifted within me. "I understand you're in a difficult position," I said, maintaining my composure. "But I need to prioritize my own health right now. I'm sure you understand that, given your emphasis on prioritizing Ethan's health above all else." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. My mother had clearly not expected this response from the daughter who had always acquiesced to family needs. "This isn't like you, Sarah," she finally said, her tone hardening. "You've always put family first." "Yes, I have," I agreed. "For 7 years, I've put everyone else's needs before my own. Now I'm putting myself first, just as you all are putting yourselves first." "That's not fair," she protested. "We don't have any choice. Neither do I, Mom." I cut her off gently but definitively. "I'm sorry, but my decision stands. I hope you can find another solution for Ethan's treatment." After a tense goodbye, I ended the call and looked up to find Val watching me with open admiration. "That," she said slowly, "was the most impressively calm boundary setting I have ever witnessed." Despite everything, I laughed. It didn't feel calm inside. My heart is racing. "Whim, but you did it," she pointed out. "You stood your ground. And you know what? The world didn't end." She was right. I had finally prioritized my own needs, declined to rescue my family from financial difficulty, and somehow the sky remained firmly in place. It was a small revelation, but a profound one. "I think I want to go to Phoenix," I said suddenly, the decision crystallizing in that moment of newfound strength. "I need a fresh start, away from all of this." Val's face lit. Really? You're sure?" "Yes," I confirmed, feeling more certain with each passing second. "It's time to rebuild my life on my terms, and I think I need to be somewhere new to do that effectively." "Then let's make it happen," she declared, already pulling out her notebook to start a fresh planning page. Operation Phoenix Rising is officially underway. As Val began listing tasks and considerations with her characteristic efficiency, I felt a weight lifting. The burden of obligation I'd carried for so long without even recognizing its heaviness. My family's financial demands had been like a slow-growing vine, gradually wrapping around me until it restricted my movement, my choices, my very ability to breathe freely. Now, with one difficult conversation, I had begun cutting those constraining tendrils. The process would be painful, complicated, perhaps even guilt-inducing at times. But watching Val sketch out plans for my new life, I knew with certainty that I had made the right choice. The hidden fortune I'd accumulated wasn't just money in a secret account. It was also the courage I'd found to finally value myself as much as I had valued others. The weekend passed in a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Val split her time between my hospital room and my apartment, inventorying my belongings, researching moving options, and coordinating with my medical team about transition of care to Arizona. Her energy was infectious, making what should have been overwhelming logistics feel manageable, even exciting. Dr. Patel had confirmed Monday as my discharge date, pending final scans that morning. My recovery had progressed well enough that she approved the relocation plan, provided I arranged immediate follow-up care with a neurosurgeon in Phoenix. "I've reached out to a colleague at Banner University Medical Center," she told me during Sunday rounds. "Dr. Kimberly Rivera is excellent, one of the best in the Southwest for post-aneurysm care. She's expecting your records and will be able to see you within your first week in Phoenix." The pieces were falling into place with surprising speed. My employer had officially approved remote work for at least the next 3 months, with a reevaluation of the arrangement after that period. Val had found a medical transport service that could get me to Phoenix comfortably, stopping overnight at a hotel to break up the journey as recommended by Dr. Patel. My apartment manager had agreed to a medical lease termination once I provided the proper documentation. Even my finances were in better shape than expected. After reviewing my insurance coverage carefully, I discovered my policy included transportation benefits for medical necessity relocations, which would cover most of the costs of getting to Phoenix. My hidden emergency fund remained largely intact, ready to support my new beginning. Everything was proceeding so smoothly that I should have expected a complication. It arrived Sunday evening in the form of my father, his unexpected visit catching me alone while Val had gone to my apartment to pack more of my essentials. "Sarah," he said, hovering awkwardly in the doorway, much as Ethan had days earlier. Unlike my brother, however, my father's face showed no trace of contrition. His expression was a familiar one. The stern authority figure I'd always strived to please, now tinged with disappointment. "Dad," I acknowledged, feeling my body tense instinctively. "This is a surprise." He entered the room slowly, taking in the get-well cards from coworkers, the flowers from Val, the array of planning documents and notes scattered across my adjustable table. His gaze lingered on a Phoenix real estate guide Val had brought. "Your mother mentioned you weren't being cooperative regarding Ethan's treatment," he said without preamble. "I thought I should come speak with you directly. No inquiry about my health, no expression of concern about my recovery, just straight to the point, my failure to comply with family expectations." "I'm not sure what Mom told you," I replied. "Carefully, but I explained that I'm not in a position to continue financial support right now. My own medical situation has to be my priority." "So I've heard." He settled heavily into the visitor's chair, fixing me with the look that had always made me feel simultaneously small and responsible. "But I think you're being short-sighted, Sarah. Family obligations don't disappear because of personal setbacks." The characterization of my near-fatal aneurysm as a personal setback was so dismissive that it momentarily left me speechless. In that pause, my father continued. "The restaurant has been struggling for years, you know this. Your mother and I have done everything possible to make ends meet while covering Ethan's medical costs. Your contribution has been essential. Without it, I don't know how we'll manage the new treatment protocol." "I understand it's difficult," I said, striving to remain calm. "But I've been carrying a significant portion of those costs for 7 years, Dad. I nearly died last week. I'm facing my own medical bills and recovery. Expenses. There simply isn't anything left to give right now." My father's expression hardened. "There's always something left to give for family, Sarah. Your mother told me you have savings. Substantial savings, according to what you've said in the past." A chill ran through me at the calculated way he referenced my finances. Had my parents been keeping track of what I might have accumulated, viewing it as a resource they were entitled to access? My savings are allocated for my medical costs and recovery, I stated firmly. Just as you and Mom have prioritized Ethan's needs, I need to prioritize my own health right now. And what about after you recover? He pressed. Will you resume supporting your brother then? The question revealed so much about his perspective, the assumption that my financial support was a permanent arrangement, a familial obligation that would continue indefinitely. It was time for absolute clarity. No, Dad, I won't be resuming financial support for Ethan. His face flushed with anger. That's incredibly selfish, Sarah. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I interrupted, surprising myself with the directness of the question. In the last 7 years, what support have you or Mom provided to me? The question seemed to catch him off guard. We raised you, gave you a good home, encouraged your education. I'm talking about my adult life, I clarified, since Ethan got sick. What have you contributed to my well-being? When have you asked about my needs, my dreams, my struggles? He shifted uncomfortably. You were always the independent one. You never seemed to need much from us. Everyone needs support sometimes, Dad. When I was lying in the ICU after emergency brain surgery, I needed my family. And Mom texted to tell me I was on my own. Your mother was upset, he defended weakly. Worried about Ethan's situation. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. She meant exactly what she said, I replied, a sad certainty in my voice. And now you're here, not to check on my recovery or offer help, but to pressure me into continuing financial support I can no longer provide. My father's expression shifted, a new calculation visible in his eyes. What's all this? He asked, gesturing toward the Phoenix materials on my table. Are you planning a trip? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Something in his demeanor made me cautious about sharing my relocation plans. I'm exploring options for my recovery, I said vaguely. He picked up one of the rental listings Val had printed out, his frown deepening. These look like apartment listings, in Arizona. They are. You're moving. His voice sharpened with surprise and what sounded like anger. To Arizona? Without discussing it with your family? I'm considering relocating for my recovery, yes, I confirmed, keeping my tone measured despite the rising tension. The climate will be better for my healing, and I have a close friend there who can provide support. This is preposterous, he declared, setting the paper down with enough force that it skidded across the table. You have responsibilities here, Sarah. A job, an apartment, family obligations. My job has approved remote work. My apartment lease is being terminated for medical reasons. And as for family obligations, I paused, carefully choosing my next words. I believe I've fulfilled those many times over through 7 years of financial support and a kidney donation. My father stood abruptly, his expression thunderous. This isn't like you, Sarah. You've always been the responsible one, the one we could count on. Now, when your brother needs you most, you're planning to run away to Arizona? The characterization stung, but I recognized it for what it was. Manipulation designed to trigger my lifelong sense of duty and responsibility. I'm not running away, I said firmly. I'm making a necessary choice for my health and well-being, just as you and Mom have always made choices that prioritized Ethan's health. That's different, he insisted. Ethan could die without proper treatment. And I nearly did die last week, I countered, yet none of you seemed particularly concerned about that. We stared at each other across a divide that felt unbridgeable. In my father's eyes, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Not love or concern for his eldest child, but assessment of a resource that was slipping from his grasp. If you do this, he said finally, his voice low and controlled, if you abandon your brother in his time of need, don't expect to be welcomed back when you change your mind. The threat hung in the air between us, a severing of family ties. Presented as my choice, rather than his. For a moment, old patterns of thought surfaced. The desire to placate, to apologize, to find some compromise that would maintain family harmony even at my own expense. But those patterns no longer fit the person I was becoming. Nearly dying had a way of clarifying priorities, of burning away the undergrowth of false obligations to reveal what truly mattered. "I'm not abandoning Ethan," I said quietly. "I'm saving myself. There's a difference." My father shook his head, disappointment and disapproval radiating from him in palpable waves. "Your mother was right. You've changed." "Yes," I agreed simply. "I have." He turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. "Think carefully about what you're doing, Sarah. Family is forever. Once those bonds are broken, they can't easily be repaired." After he left, I sat in silence, processing the confrontation. The emotional weight of my father's disappointment and implied rejection was heavy, tapping into years of conditioning that had taught me my worth was measured by my usefulness to the family. Yet alongside the hurt was a growing sense of liberation. My father's visit had revealed with perfect clarity the transactional nature of my family's love, conditional upon my continued financial support, disappearing the moment I prioritized my own needs. Val found me in this contemplative state when she returned an hour later, arms laden with items from my apartment. "You okay?" she asked immediately, setting down her bags and studying my face with concern. "You look like you've been through the ringer." "My father stopped by," I explained. Her eyebrows shot up. "Let me guess, not to deliver flowers and well wishes? To pressure me about continuing to support Ethan, and to express his disapproval about the Phoenix plan." Val's expression darkened. How did he even know about Phoenix? "Saw the materials on the table. He wasn't pleased." "I bet he wasn't," she muttered, dropping into the chair my father had vacated. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that I'm prioritizing my health and making decisions based on what's best for me now." "Good for you," she said fiercely. "How did he take it?" I hesitated, the pain of his parting words still fresh. "Not well. He essentially said if I go through with this, I shouldn't expect to be welcomed back into the family." Val's eyes widened, in disbelief. "He threatened to disown you? For moving to Phoenix to recover from brain surgery? That's insane, Sarah." "It's their way of maintaining control," I realized, speaking the insight aloud as it formed. "They're losing their financial support system and they're panicking." Val reached for my hand, squeezing it supportively. "You know this just confirms you're making the right decision, right? Healthy families don't behave this way." She was right, of course. My father's visit, rather than making me question my plans, had cemented my resolve to create distance and establish a new life beyond their influence. "It does make things more complicated emotionally," I admitted. "Despite everything, they're still my family. I wasn't planning to cut ties completely." "And you don't have to," Val assured me. "You're creating healthy boundaries, not burning bridges. They're the ones threatening to cut ties if you don't comply with their demands." I nodded, finding comfort in the clarity of her perspective. "It still hurts." "Of course it does," she acknowledged gently. "You're grieving the family you thought you had, the one that would support you unconditionally, the way you supported them. It's a profound loss." Her understanding broke something open inside me, releasing tears I'd been holding back throughout my father's visit. Val simply held my hand, allowing me the space to process my grief without trying to minimize or fix it. When the tears finally subsided, I felt different, lighter somehow, as if crying had released not just sadness, but the last vestiges of guilt about my decision. "Thank you," I said simply. Val smiled. "What are friends for?" "Now, are we still On for Operation Phoenix Rising, or did your dad's visit change your mind? I thought about my father's threat, my mother's dismissal, the years of one-sided support, and the freedom waiting for me in Arizona. The decision was clearer than ever. We're definitely still on, I confirmed. In fact, let's accelerate the timeline if possible. I want to leave Minneapolis as soon as I'm discharged. Val grinned, her expression both proud and conspiratorial. That's my girl. Now, let's talk about what furniture you want to keep and what we should sell. As we dove into practical planning, I realized that my father's visit, intended to pressure me into maintaining the status quo, had instead become the catalyst for my complete break from old patterns. Sometimes the clearest path forward only becomes visible when someone tries to block your way. The hidden fortune that would fund my fresh start wasn't just financial, it was the courage to choose myself, even when that choice came with painful consequences. Monday morning arrived with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. My final brain scans were scheduled for 9 a.m., with discharge pending favorable results. Val had already transformed my apartment into a logistical command center, sorting my belongings into categories: ship to Phoenix, donate, sell, or discard. She'd enlisted 2 colleagues from her remote job to help with the heavy lifting, promising them dinner and eternal gratitude in return. Everything was proceeding according to plan until a nurse arrived with unexpected news. "You have visitors," she announced, her expression carefully neutral. "Your mother and brother are in the waiting area. Should I send them in?" My heart rate spiked, triggering a small alarm on the monitoring equipment. After my father's confrontational visit yesterday, I wasn't eager for another emotional challenge just hours before discharge. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," I hedged, looking to Val for support. "Maybe we should hear what they have to say," she suggested gently. "You're leaving tomorrow. This might be your last chance to talk face-to-face for a while." She had a point. Despite everything, the thought of leaving without any closure with my mother and brother felt wrong somehow. I nodded to the nurse. "They can come in, but only for a few minutes." Val squeezed my hand supportively. "Want me to stay or give you privacy?" "Stay," I said immediately. "Please." My mother entered first, her posture stiff with what I recognized as suppressed anxiety. Ethan followed, moving slowly, his complexion paler than during his previous visit. The physical contrast between them was striking, my mother's calculated composure versus my brother's genuine fragility. "Sarah," my mother began, her voice carefully modulated. "We heard you're being discharged today. That's wonderful news." "Yes," I confirmed, watching her closely. "The doctors are pleased with my recovery so far." An awkward silence followed as my mother glanced at Val, clearly hesitant to speak freely in front of a witness. Val merely smiled pleasantly, making no move to leave. "Your father told us about your plans," my mother finally continued. "Moving to Arizona seems very sudden, very extreme." "It's not extreme," I countered calmly. "It's a medically sound decision. My doctors have approved it, and I've already arranged for continuing care in Phoenix." "But so far away from family?" she pressed. "When you're still recovering from a serious condition?" The concern might have seemed genuine if not for what had preceded it. The abandonment, the financial demands, my father's ultimatum. "I'll have support," I assured her, gesturing toward Val. "And the climate will be better for my recovery than a Minnesota winter." My mother's expression tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Sarah, I think you're making a rash decision while emotionally vulnerable. Brain injuries can affect judgment." "I don't have a brain injury," I interrupted, feeling my patience wearing thin. "I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage that was successfully treated. My cognitive functions are completely intact as my doctors will confirm." "Even so," she persisted, "major life decisions should be postponed until you're fully recovered. Why not stay here? Let us help you through the initial recovery period. and then reassess in a few months. The offer might have tempted me once. The possibility of reconciliation, of family support, of maintaining connections despite our differences. But the qualifier, "let us help you," rang hollow after her text message declaring I was on my own. "Mom," I said gently but firmly, "you made it very clear that you and Dad weren't available to help with my recovery. That's why I've made alternative arrangements." She flushed, glancing uncomfortably at Val again. I was upset when I sent that message. We were dealing with some difficult news about Ethan's treatment. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Before I could respond, Ethan spoke up, his voice quiet but steady. "She did mean it, Mom. Let's at least be honest about that." My mother turned to him, surprised and clearly displeased by his intervention. "Ethan, we agreed." "We agreed to talk to Sarah," he cut in, an unusual assertiveness in his tone, "not to manipulate her." He turned to me, his expression weary but determined. "Dad told us you refused to continue helping with my medical expenses, that you're moving to Arizona and cutting ties with the family." "That's not exactly," I began, but he raised a hand. "Let me finish, please." When he said that, Mom immediately started planning this visit. She thought if we came here, played on your emotions, we could convince you to change your mind. He took a shaky breath. "But I can't be part of that anymore, Sarah." My mother's face had gone pale with shock at this departure from their apparent script. "Ethan, you're not well. You're upset and not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," he countered. "Do you know what it's like to watch your sister give and give until there's nothing left, knowing you're the reason she's depleting herself? To see her nearly die, and then watch our parents worry more about losing her financial support than about losing her." The raw emotion in his voice silenced the room. Even Val, who had been a quiet presence until now, looked stunned by the intensity of his words. "I never wanted this," Ethan continued, addressing me directly now. "I never asked you to sacrifice everything for my treatments, and I can't stand by while they try to guilt you into continuing, especially now." Tears filled my eyes as I reached for my brother's hand. Despite his physical weakness, his grip was surprisingly strong. "I know you didn't ask for it," I assured him. "This isn't about blaming you, Ethan. It never has been. But it is about boundaries," he said, surprising me with his insight. "Boundaries that should have been established years ago. Boundaries that you're finally setting, and that Mom and Dad can't accept." My mother had moved to the window, her back to us, shoulders rigid with anger or distress. Perhaps both. When she turned around, her expression was coldly composed. "I see you've already made up your mind," she said to me, "and apparently influenced your brother as well." She gathered her purse, movements precise and controlled. "If you're determined to abandon your family obligations, Sarah, there's nothing more to discuss." "Mom, stop," Ethan protested. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. Sarah nearly died. She's given me a kidney, paid for years of my treatments, put her own life on hold. She's not abandoning anyone by finally taking care of herself." My mother ignored him, focusing instead on me with a gaze that had lost all pretense of maternal warmth. "Your father was right. You've changed. The daughter I raised would never have put her own desires above her family's needs." The accusation was designed to wound, to trigger the lifetime of conditioning that had taught me my value lay in self-sacrifice. But I found myself strangely unmoved by it now, recognizing the manipulation for what it was. "The daughter you raised," I replied, quietly, "nearly died without ever having lived for herself. I think it's time she tried something different." My mother's lips thinned into a hard line. Without another word, she turned and walked out, leaving Ethan behind in a stunning display of prioritization that spoke volumes. The three of us, Ethan, Val, and I, sat in shocked silence for a moment. Then Ethan let out a long, shaky breath. "Well, that went about as well as expected," he said with a weak attempt at humor. Are you okay? I asked, concerned about the toll this confrontation might take on his already compromised health. He nodded. Better than I have been in a long time, actually. Standing up to Mom was overdue. She's going to be furious with you, I warned. Probably, he agreed. But I couldn't let her ambush you like that. Not after everything you've done for me. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I want you to know something, Sarah. I support your decision to move, to start fresh, to finally put yourself first. The simple declaration of support, coming from the person who had benefited most from my sacrifices, felt like absolution. Thank you, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. That means more than you know. Val, who had remained respectfully silent during the family drama, finally spoke. Your brother is welcome to visit us in Phoenix any time, just saying. Ethan smiled at her gratefully. I might take you up on that, health permitting. A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Ms. Reynolds, they're ready for your final scans now. I should go, Ethan said, rising slowly from his chair. Let you prepare for your tests. I held onto his hand, reluctant to let him leave after such a momentous conversation. What will you do now, with Mom and Dad? He shrugged, a gesture that carried both resignation and newfound determination. Live my life as best I can. Try to take more control of my own situation instead of letting them manage everything. Maybe look into patient assistance programs for the medications. Stay in touch? I asked, hating how uncertain my voice sounded. Absolutely, he promised. This isn't goodbye, Sarah. It's just a new chapter. For both of us. After. A careful hug that accounted for both my surgical site and his general fragility, Ethan left, walking slowly but with a straighter posture than I'd seen in years. Val watched him go with obvious admiration. I like your brother, she declared. That took serious guts. What he just did. It did, I agreed, still processing the unexpected turn of events. I never expected him to stand up to Mom like that. Sometimes people surprise you, Val said thoughtfully, and not always in bad ways. As the orderly arrived with a wheelchair to transport me to radiology, I found myself at a crossroads, more significant than any I'd faced before. My mother's rejection had been absolute, drawing a clear line between family loyalty as she defined it and the path I had chosen. My father's earlier ultimatum had been reinforced by her cold departure. Yet Ethan's support had revealed another possibility, that family connections could evolve rather than simply end, that boundaries could create healthier relationships rather than destroying them entirely. The question now was how to move forward. Continue with the Phoenix plan as arranged, making a clean break from Minneapolis and the toxic dynamics of my family? Or modify the plan to accommodate some middle path that maintained certain connections while still prioritizing my own well-being. As the radiology technicians positioned me for the brain scan, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to envision both futures. In one, I built a completely new life in Phoenix, free from obligations and expectations, focused entirely on my own healing and growth. In the other, I maintained selective connections, perhaps with Ethan, perhaps with extended family or old friends, while still establishing necessary boundaries with my parents. Both paths had merit. Both offered healing in different ways. The critical decision wasn't just about geography anymore. It was about how completely I needed to sever old ties in order to forge a healthier future. When the scan was complete, Dr. Patel arrived with results that mirrored my internal questions. Progress, but with complexities still to navigate. The hemorrhage has resolved nicely, she explained, showing me the images. There's still some residual inflammation, which is normal at this stage, but overall I'm very pleased with your recovery so far. So I'm cleared for discharge? For the move to Phoenix? I asked, needing certainty about at least this one aspect of my future. She nodded. Medically, yes. I've already sent your records to Dr. Rivera, and she's arranged for your first follow-up appointment next week. She paused, studying my face. But I sense there might be other considerations beyond the medical ones? Family complications, I admitted. Nothing I can't handle. Dr. Patel's expression softened with understanding. Recovery isn't just physical, Sarah. It's emotional, psychological, spiritual even. Whatever decisions you make should support your complete healing, not just your brain, but your heart as well. Her words stayed with me as I was wheeled back to my room, where Val waited with discharge paperwork and a triumphant grin. All clear? She asked. All clear, I confirmed. Dr. Patel has officially approved Operation Phoenix Rising. Excellent. She handed me a freshly charged phone. I have the movers confirmed for Wednesday, your apartment sublease is being finalized as we speak, and our road trip chariot awaits your royal presence tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Everything was in place. The path forward was prepared. Obstacles removed, support systems established. All that remained was my final decision. Not about whether to go to Phoenix, but about how completely to close the door on what I was leaving behind. As Val continued detailing our departure plans, I found myself opening my email and composing a message to Ethan. Whatever else happened, I wanted that door to remain open, that connection to survive the transitions ahead. Thank you for your support today, I wrote. It meant everything. This isn't goodbye. It's just distance, not disconnection. When you're feeling stronger, Phoenix has excellent medical facilities and a spare bedroom with your name on it. Love you always. As I pressed send, I felt something settle within me, a certainty that I could honor both my need for a fresh start and the genuine bonds worth preserving. The hidden fortune that would fund my new beginning wasn't just financial, it was the wealth of wisdom gained through difficult lessons about where to invest my emotional resources and when to protect them instead. Tomorrow would bring a new city, new surroundings, new possibilities. But today had brought something equally valuable: clarity about which ties to sever and which to carefully, thoughtfully maintain. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect fall day in Minneapolis. Sunlight streamed through the hospital window as I gathered my few personal items, preparing for discharge after 8 days that had transformed my life in ways I was still processing. Val arrived early, bubbling with energy, and armed with a detailed checklist for our departure. Your chariot awaits, my lady, she announced, wheeling in a hospital-issued wheelchair decorated with a small hand-lettered sign reading, Phoenix Rising, Departure Gate. The childish touch made me laugh, releasing some of the tension that had built overnight. You're ridiculous, I told her fondly. Ridiculously organized, she corrected, producing a folder from her bag. Discharge papers, prescriptions, follow-up, appointment schedule, and a step-by-step itinerary for our journey to Phoenix, including designated rest stops where we can stretch your legs and take medication. Her thoroughness was exactly what I needed. Practical support that allowed me to focus on the emotional aspects of this transition. Last night, after my mother's cold departure and Ethan's surprising support, I'd lain awake for hours, thoughts, cycling between doubt, determination, grief, and cautious optimism. By morning, I was emotionally exhausted but resolute. Phoenix represented not just a geographical move, but a psychological one, a chance to recalibrate my understanding of family, obligation, and self-worth. Dr. Patel arrived for final discharge. Instructions, reviewing medication schedules and activity restrictions with both Val and me. The first few weeks are critical for proper healing, she emphasized. No lifting anything heavier than 5 pounds, no bending or straining, and absolutely no driving until cleared by Dr. Rivera in Phoenix. I'll make sure she follows orders, Val promised solemnly. I have no doubt, Dr. Patel smiled, then turned to me with a more serious expression. Sarah, I want to emphasize something important. Brain injuries, even successfully treated ones like yours, can have emotional side effects. Mood swings, unexpected tears, anxiety, even personality changes can occur during recovery. This is normal and usually temporary. I nodded, having already experienced the emotional volatility she described. I've noticed I'm more reactive than usual. Exactly. Be patient with yourself. Your brain is healing, and that includes the areas that regulate emotion. She handed me a business card. This is my direct number. I'll be coordinating with Dr. Rivera, but don't hesitate to contact me if you have questions during your transition. The gesture touched me deeply. This busy neurosurgeon taking time to provide personal support beyond the standard follow-up protocols. Thank you, I said, hoping she could read the genuine gratitude in my expression. For everything. You're very welcome. She hesitated, then added, I understand from your friend that you're making this move without family support. That's challenging under normal circumstances, let alone during recovery from a major health event. Please make sure you're connecting with appropriate support resources in Phoenix. I will, I promised. After a final check of my incision site and neurological responses, Dr. Patel officially signed my discharge papers. A nurse arrived to review medication instructions once more, and then, almost anticlimactically, I was free to leave. Val helped me change from the hospital gown into comfortable travel clothes she'd brought, loose-fitting joggers, a soft button-up shirt that wouldn't need to be pulled over my head, and slip-on shoes. Simple tasks like dressing still required concentration and moved at half speed, my body reminding me that despite the discharge papers, I was still very much in recovery. Ready? Val asked when I was dressed, medications packed, and personal items gathered. As I'll ever be, I replied, settling into the wheelchair. The journey from my room to the hospital exit felt symbolic, a passage from one life to another, from the person I had been to the person I was becoming. Hospital staff who had cared for me over the past 8 days offered encouraging smiles and well wishes as we passed. Nurse Diane, who had been there from the beginning, even stepped away from her station to give me a gentle hug. You're going to be just fine, she whispered with conviction. Better than fine. Outside, autumn sunlight warmed my face as Val helped me into the passenger seat of a rented SUV. The vehicle was specifically chosen for comfort during our 2-day journey. Plush seats that reclined easily, smooth suspension to minimize jostling, and enough space in the back for our essential belongings. The movers will handle everything else on Thursday, Val explained as she stowed my small suitcase. Your furniture is being put in storage until you decide what you want to do with it. Clothes and personal items are packed for shipping, and everything else has been either donated or sold. You've thought of everything, I marveled, impressed by how much she'd accomplished in just a few days. That's what best friends do, she replied simply, sliding behind the wheel. Now, first. Stop. Your apartment for one final check before we hit the road. My stomach tightened at the prospect of seeing my apartment, my home for the past 5 years, for the last time. I hadn't been there since the morning of my collapse, when I'd rushed out the door late for work, oblivious to how completely life was about to change. Val seemed to sense my apprehension. We don't have to stop if you don't want to, she offered. I can do a final walkthrough later this week before handing in the keys. No, I want to see it, I decided. I need closure. The 15-minute drive to my apartment building passed in comfortable silence. Val navigated the familiar streets, while I watched the cityscape scroll by, the coffee shop where I'd spent weekend mornings reading, the park where I'd walked to clear my head after stressful workdays, the local businesses that had formed the backdrop of my Minneapolis life. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were already a visitor rather than a resident. When we reached my building, Val parked in my designated spot one last time. Want me to come up with you, or would you prefer some time alone? Alone, I think, I said, appreciating her sensitivity. Just for a few minutes. Take your time. I'll wait here. The 3 flights of stairs to my 3rd-floor unit were more challenging than I'd anticipated. By the 2nd landing, I was breathing heavily, my body reminding me of its limitations. I paused, leaning against the wall, struck by the realization that this simple act, climbing stairs I'd navigated thoughtlessly thousands of times, had become a significant physical challenge, another reminder of how drastically life had changed. When I finally reached my apartment and unlocked the door, I was unprepared for the emotional impact of seeing my home stripped down to its bare essentials. The furniture remained, staged for the property manager's showings to potential new tenants, but all personal touches had been removed. No photos on the walls, no books on the shelves, no throw pillows or decorative items that had made the space distinctly mine. I moved slowly through the rooms, trailing my fingers along surfaces, saying goodbye to the space that had sheltered me through important years of my adult life. The living room where I'd hosted dinner parties and movie nights. The kitchen where I'd learned to cook properly after years of student budget meals. The bedroom where I'd slept, dreamed, and occasionally cried when the weight of family obligations became too heavy. In the bathroom, I caught sight of myself in the mirror and paused, struck by the physical changes. I was thinner, my face drawn from the surgery and subsequent stress. The incision on my scalp was hidden by hair, but visible if I turned my head just so, a permanent reminder of how close I'd come to death. "Who are you now?" I whispered to my reflection. Not the dutiful daughter and sister who had sacrificed her own dreams and financial security for family. Not the woman who had measured her worth by what she could provide to others. But who, exactly? The question lingered, unanswered but not distressing. Perhaps discovering the answer was part of the journey ahead. In my home office, I found a single item Val had intentionally left behind. My vision board from 3 years ago, created during a company retreat focused on personal and professional goal setting. I'd forgotten about it entirely. This collage of images and words that had represented dreams I'd never actively pursued. Travel to distant locations, a home with a garden, time for creative hobbies, even a relationship. All aspects of life. I'd deprioritized while focusing on work and family obligations. I carefully removed the board from the wall, suddenly certain it should come with me to Phoenix. A reminder of deferred dreams now possibly within reach. With one last look around the empty apartment, I locked the door behind me, leaving the key under the mat as arranged with Val. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, physically locking away my old life before embarking on a new one. The stairs were even more challenging going down, and I was breathing heavily by the time I reached the SUV. Val took one look at my face and wordlessly handed me a tissue for the tears I hadn't realized were falling. "It's okay to grieve what you're leaving behind," she said gently as I settled into the passenger seat. "Even when you're moving toward something better." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Val didn't press for conversation, simply squeezed my hand before starting the engine. "Ready to begin our grand adventure?" she asked when I'd composed myself. "Ready," I confirmed, setting the vision board carefully on the back seat. As we pulled away from the apartment building, I didn't look back, a deliberate choice that felt significant. Instead, I focused ahead, watching the road unfold before us as Val navigated toward the interstate that would take us south and west, toward Phoenix, and the next chapter of my life. Our first day's journey took us from Minneapolis to Omaha, Nebraska, a relatively short driving day designed to ease me into travel while still recovering. Val had researched hotels with accessibility features, booking a ground-floor suite with separate bedrooms and a small kitchenette where we could prepare simple meals rather than navigating restaurants. The drive itself was peaceful, the rolling landscape of southern Minnesota giving way to the Iowa countryside. Val kept me entertained with playlists from our college days and stories about her life in Phoenix, the desert hiking trails, the vibrant art scene, the diverse community she'd found there. "It's not perfect," she acknowledged. "Summer heat is brutal, water conservation is a constant concern, and the politics can be frustrating. But there's something magical about the desert, this sense of possibility, of reinvention." "Reinvention sounds perfect right now," I admitted, watching cornfields scroll past the window. "I feel like I've been playing a role for so long that I'm not sure who I am without it." "That's the beautiful thing about fresh starts," Val replied thoughtfully. "You get to decide who you want to be without the weight of others' expectations." The observation resonated deeply, highlighting exactly what had been missing in my Minneapolis life: the freedom to define myself beyond my family's needs and expectations. For years, I'd been Ethan's sister, or the responsible one, or our financial support. Roles that, while important, had gradually overshadowed my individual identity. In Phoenix, no one would know those roles. No one would expect me to fulfill them. I could simply be Sarah, a woman discovering who she was and what she wanted from life. We arrived at our Omaha hotel by late afternoon, timing deliberate to avoid my first travel day stretching too long. Val handled the check-in while I rested in the car, then helped me to our suite, a process that highlighted my continuing physical limitations. Even the short walk from parking lot to room left me winded and slightly dizzy, my body not yet recovered, enough for sustained activity. "This is frustrating," I confessed, sinking gratefully onto the suite's comfortable sofa. "I feel like an invalid." "You're recovering from brain surgery," Val reminded me matter-of-factly. "8 days ago, you were in the ICU. Cut yourself some slack." Her pragmatic perspective helped recalibrate my expectations. Of course, I was still weak. The body needed time to heal from such significant trauma. The important thing was that each day brought small improvements. Less pain, greater stamina, clearer thinking. That evening, as we shared a simple dinner Val had prepared in the kitchenette, my phone buzzed with a text message. I tensed instinctively, conditioned by years of family emergencies to expect demands or crises. But the message was from Ethan. "Hope day 1 of your journey went well. Thinking of you. Rest when you need to, and enjoy this new beginning. You've earned it." The simple message of support without demands or guilt brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I showed the phone to Val, who read it and smiled. "See? Not all family connections have to be toxic. Seems like your brother is figuring out how to have a healthier relationship with you." "I hope so," I replied, typing a brief but warm response to Ethan. "He's been caught in the middle of family dynamics for so long. Maybe my leaving will actually help him establish better boundaries too." "Exactly." Val nodded approvingly. "Sometimes the healthiest thing we can do for others is model setting our own boundaries." After dinner, exhaustion hit me like a physical force. Val helped me through my evening medication routine and made sure I was comfortably settled in my bedroom before retreating to her own. Despite the fatigue, sleep proved elusive as my mind processed the day's transitions and the magnitude of changes still ahead. I found myself opening my banking app, checking the balance of my secret fund, the financial cushion that made this journey possible. The numbers on the screen represented more than money. They were tangible proof of my foresight, my quiet resistance to being completely consumed by family obligations. Even at my most self-sacrificing, some core part of me had maintained this boundary, this protection of my future self. The realization was strangely empowering. If I had possessed the wisdom to create this financial safety net years ago, perhaps I had more internal resources than I'd given myself credit for. Perhaps the strength to rebuild my life had been within me all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. With that comforting thought, I finally drifted to sleep. Not the medication-induced unconsciousness of the hospital, but natural healing rest. The second day of our journey took us from Omaha through Colorado and into northern New Mexico, where we'd planned our overnight stop. The landscape transformed dramatically as we traveled, from the agricultural flatlands of Nebraska to the rising elevations of Colorado and the stark, haunting beauty of the high desert. It's like watching a visual representation of my life transition, I observed as red rock formations appeared on the horizon. Everything familiar gradually giving way to something completely different. Val glanced over from the driver's seat, smiling. That's very poetic for an accountant. Maybe I'll discover hidden talents in Phoenix, I joked. Sarah Reynolds, desert poet. Why not? That's the whole point of this journey, discovering who you are beyond the roles you've played. As we drove, I found myself mentally cataloging not just what I was leaving behind, but what I was moving toward. Professional growth through remote work and potentially new opportunities. Personal development without the constant drain of family obligations. Physical healing in a climate gentler than Minnesota winters. Friendship with Val and the possibility of new connections in Phoenix. For the first time, the future felt open with possibility rather than constrained by responsibility. We stopped frequently throughout the day, honoring Dr. Patel's instructions about movement and rest. At one scenic overlook in Colorado, Val spread a blanket on a grassy area away from other tourists, and we enjoyed a picnic lunch while absorbing spectacular mountain views. I never would have seen this if I'd stayed trapped in my old patterns, I mused, breathing in the crisp mountain air. There's a whole world I've been missing. And now you get to explore it, Val replied, handing me a sandwich. One day at a time, as your health allows. By the time we reached our hotel in Santa Fe, I was exhausted but in a different way than the previous day. A pleasant fatigue mixed with excitement rather than pure physical depletion. The desert sunset painted the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks as we checked in, a welcome I chose to interpret as auspicious. That night, after settling into our second hotel suite, I received an unexpected email from my supervisor, Marjorie. Sarah, just checking in on your journey. The team asked me to let you know we're all thinking of you and looking forward to having you back in the virtual workspace when you're ready. No pressure. Take all the time you need to recover. We've reassigned your current projects but have some interesting remote opportunities coming up that might be perfect for your transition back. Let's talk when you're settled in Phoenix. The message reinforced what I was beginning to understand, that support could come from unexpected sources, that professional relationships could sometimes offer more genuine care than family ones, that my value extended beyond what I could provide to my parents and brother. The third day of our journey took us through the remaining stretch of New Mexico and into Arizona, the landscape growing increasingly arid and dramatic. As we approached Phoenix in the late afternoon, the iconic saguaro cacti appeared, standing like sentinels welcoming us to the desert. Almost home, Val announced as the city skyline appeared on the horizon, the setting sun glinting off downtown buildings. Home. The word resonated unexpectedly. Not my apartment in Minneapolis, not my parents' house, but this new place. A city I'd never visited, a landscape unlike anything I'd known, a life I was just beginning to imagine. Val's apartment complex was exactly as she'd described. Single-level units arranged around a central courtyard with a pool. Desert landscaping providing privacy and beauty simultaneously. Her two-bedroom unit was bright and airy, decorated in southwestern colors that somehow managed to feel both vibrant and soothing. The guest room is all yours for as long as you need it, she said, showing me the space she'd prepared. A comfortable bed with extra pillows for elevation as my doctors had recommended. A bedside table arranged with my medications and water. Even a small vase of desert wildflowers to welcome me. The thoughtfulness of the arrangement, so different from my family's dismissal, brought tears to my eyes for what felt like the 100th time in recent days. Thank you, I managed, for everything. Val simply hugged me carefully, mindful of my still healing body. Welcome to your new beginning, Sarah. This is just day one. As I settled into the guest room that would be my home for the coming Weeks or months, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Not just the 3-day drive from Minneapolis, but the emotional path from self-sacrificing daughter and sister to a woman reclaiming her right to prioritize her own well-being. The hidden fortune that had facilitated this transition wasn't just the money in my secret account. It was the courage to choose myself, the wisdom to recognize unhealthy patterns, and the strength to create distance from those who couldn't respect my boundaries. These were the true resources that would fund my new life, a life I was now free to design according to my own values and dreams. Outside the window, the desert sunset painted the sky in spectacular colors, the beauty both foreign and welcoming. From my bed, I could see a single saguaro cactus silhouetted against the crimson horizon, standing tall, independent, thriving in challenging conditions. A fitting metaphor, I thought, for the person I was becoming. My first 2 weeks in Phoenix established a gentle rhythm of recovery. Mornings began with medication and breakfast on Val's small patio, the desert air still cool enough to enjoy before the day's heat built. Afternoons were devoted to rest and brief walks around the complex, gradually increasing in distance as my strength returned. Evenings brought simple shared meals and conversations that reconnected us after years of living in different cities. Dr. Rivera, my new neurosurgeon, proved as competent and compassionate as Dr. Patel had promised. After a thorough examination and review of my records, she pronounced herself cautiously optimistic about my recovery trajectory. "The brain is remarkably resilient," she explained during my first appointment, "especially in someone your age with no pre-existing conditions. Follow the protocol we've discussed, and I expect you'll continue to improve steadily." With medical care established, professional arrangements secured through remote work, and daily living needs met through Val's generous hospitality, I should have felt only relief and gratitude. But as physical healing progressed, emotional complications emerged, not just lingering grief over my family's betrayal, but unexpected guilt about my absence during Ethan's continuing health struggles. Our text exchanges remained supportive, but increasingly strained as his condition deteriorated, and our parents' financial desperation grew. Though he never explicitly asked for help, the subtext was clear in messages like, "New treatment, not covered by insurance. Mom and Dad meeting with financial counselor tomorrow." I maintained firm boundaries while offering emotional support, a delicate balance that left me drained after each conversation. Val noticed, of course. "You're carrying survivor's guilt," she observed one evening as I set aside my phone after another difficult exchange with Ethan, as if choosing your own well-being somehow makes you responsible for his suffering. "Isn't it?" I asked, voicing the question that had been haunting me. "I have the means to help him, even now. By withholding it, am I any better than Mom and Dad were when they abandoned me?" "That's a false equivalence," Val countered firmly. "You supported Ethan for 7 years, depleting your savings, and literally giving him a part of your body. Your parents couldn't manage even basic emotional support during a life-threatening crisis that lasted 8 days." Her logic was irrefutable, but emotions rarely respond to logic. The guilt persisted, a shadow over my otherwise promising new beginning. 3 weeks into my Phoenix life, the situation escalated dramatically. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the patio, checking email, and mentally preparing for my first half-day of remote work, when an unfamiliar car pulled into the visitor parking space visible from Val's unit. My father emerged from the driver's side, my mother from the passenger seat. The coffee mug slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering on the patio tiles. They had found me. Somehow, despite all precautions, the private transport, the confidentiality requests to the hospital, the careful management of information, they had tracked me to Val's apartment in Phoenix. Val emerged from inside, alerted by the sound of breaking ceramic. "What happened? Are you—" She followed my frozen gaze to the parking area and inhaled sharply. "Is that—" "My parents," I confirmed, my voice oddly calm despite the adrenaline flooding my system. I don't know how they found me. Val's expression hardened. You don't have to see them. I can tell them to leave, call security if necessary. The offer was tempting, to avoid the confrontation, to maintain the protective bubble I'd created around my recovery. But avoidance, I realized, would only postpone the inevitable. This confrontation had been building since the moment I'd decided to prioritize myself over family obligations. No, I decided, rising from my chair with more steadiness than I felt. I need to face them, to end this properly. Val looked concerned but nodded. I'll be right here if you need backup. I moved through the apartment to the front door, pausing to check my reflection in the entryway mirror. The woman who gazed back at me was changed from the one who had collapsed outside her Minneapolis office building a month ago. Thinner, yes, with faint shadows still beneath her eyes from ongoing recovery. But there was something else too, a steadiness in her gaze, a set to her jaw that spoke of newfound resolve. I opened the door before they could knock, catching both my parents off guard. They stood on the small porch, travel-rumpled and tense. My mother clutched her purse with white-knuckled hands. My father's face bore the tight expression I recognized from childhood confrontations. How did you find me? I asked without preamble. My father shifted uncomfortably. Ethan had your friend's address from the care package he sent. So that was it. The small box of Minnesota comfort items Ethan had shipped the previous week, his way of showing support despite his own struggles. I hadn't thought to caution him against sharing Val's address, a naive oversight given my parents. Evident determination. You should have called first, I said, making no move to invite them inside. I'm still recovering. Unexpected stress isn't recommended. Would you have agreed to see us if we'd called? My mother challenged, her voice brittle. Probably not, I admitted, which should tell you something about forcing this confrontation. My father stepped forward, using his height to subtly intimidate as he had throughout my childhood. We wouldn't have had to track you down if you hadn't abandoned your family without warning. I gave plenty of warning, I corrected calmly. I explained my decision to all of you. You simply didn't respect it. Because it's irresponsible, my mother interjected. Running away to Arizona while your brother's condition worsens, while your family struggles financially? I didn't run away, I interrupted, refusing to accept her framing. I made a medically sound decision to relocate for my recovery after brain surgery. Surgery that nearly didn't happen in time because my colleague found me collapsed, not my family who were too focused on Ethan to even check on me. Val appeared, silently beside me, her presence a steadying force. My parents' expressions shifted as they registered this witness to our family dysfunction. Perhaps we could continue this conversation inside, my father suggested, his tone modulating into something more reasonable. This isn't a discussion for the doorstep. I hesitated, weighing the invasion of my safe space against the benefits of containing this confrontation away from neighbors' curious eyes. 15 minutes. I decided finally. You can have 15 minutes of my time, but if the conversation becomes aggressive or manipulative, I'll ask you to leave immediately. They exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by this assertive version of their usually compliant daughter. After a moment, they nodded agreement. I led them into Val's living room, taking the armchair while they settled uncomfortably on the sofa. Val remained standing by the kitchen counter, close enough to intervene if needed, but giving us space for the conversation. The deliberate positioning wasn't lost on my parents, who cast her resentful glances. Why are you here? I asked directly. What do you hope to accomplish by tracking me down? My father cleared his throat. Ethan's condition has deteriorated significantly. He needs another surgery, one that's experimental and not covered by insurance. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. I've been in regular contact with Ethan. I'm aware of his health challenges. Then you know how desperate the situation is, my mother pressed. The procedure costs $175,000. We've mortgaged the house to its limit, liquidated our retirement accounts, even considered selling the restaurant. But we're still short by nearly $80,000. The amount hung in the air between us, a sum that would deplete most of my remaining emergency fund, the financial cushion that made my new beginning possible. We wouldn't ask if there were any other option, my father added, his tone softening into something that mimicked genuine concern. But this is Ethan's life we're talking about. Your brother. The emotional manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. They hadn't come to reconcile or understand my perspective. They hadn't even come because they were worried about me after my own life-threatening medical crisis. They had traveled over 1,000 miles solely to access my financial resources. Did Ethan ask you to come here? I questioned, already knowing. The answer. My mother looked away. He doesn't know we've come. He would never ask you directly, not after. Everything. No, he wouldn't, I agreed. Because unlike you, Ethan respects my boundaries. He understands that I nearly died and am still recovering. He accepts that I've already given 7 years of financial support and a literal part of my body to help him. So you're refusing to help, my father concluded, anger edging his voice. Your own brother could die because you're being selfish. Val made a small noise of disbelief from her position by the counter, but I gestured for her to let me handle this. I'm not being selfish, I replied with a calm I didn't entirely feel. I'm practicing self-preservation after years of sacrificing my own needs for everyone else's. And I find it telling that you immediately interpret reasonable boundaries as selfishness. What would you call it? My mother demanded. You have the means to help save your brother's life, and you're choosing not to. I call it a consequence of choices made over many years, I said. Yours, mine, all of ours. You chose to place the entire financial burden of Ethan's care on me rather than exploring other options. I chose to enable that by never setting proper boundaries, and now I'm choosing a different path. My father stood abruptly, towering over me in a posture I recognized from childhood arguments, physically imposing, designed to intimidate. We are your family, he stated, as if this simple fact trumped all other considerations. Family takes care of each other, no matter what. I remained seated, refusing to be intimidated. Exactly. Family takes care of each other. So where were you when I was in the ICU? Where was your support during my recovery? Why did Mom text me that I was on my own? That's different, my mother protested weakly. Yes, it is, I agreed. Because when I needed emotional support, something that costs nothing but time and care, you were unwilling to provide it. Yet you expect me to deplete my financial security for you without hesitation. A tense silence filled the room. I could almost see them recalculating, searching for another angle of approach now that emotional manipulation had failed. What if we structured it as a loan? My father suggested finally. With repayment terms, interest if you want. Once Ethan recovers from this surgery, he can return to work part-time, start contributing to his own care costs. The proposal might have tempted me once, a seemingly reasonable compromise that acknowledged my concerns while still meeting their needs. But I recognized it now as another form of the same pattern. My resources flowing outward to my family with promises of reciprocity that would never materialize. No, I said firmly. I won't be providing financial support for Ethan's treatment. My mother gasped as if physically struck. How can you be so cold? This is your brother's life. I'm aware of what's at stake, I replied evenly. I'm also aware of other options you haven't pursued because accessing my money was easier. My father's expression darkened. What options? We've tried everything. Have you approached the hospital about charity care programs? Applied for assistance through the drug manufacturer? investigated clinical trials for the experimental treatment, pursued crowdfunding through your church and community networks? I listed possibilities I'd researched during sleepless nights, torn between guilt and self-preservation. Their silence confirmed my suspicion. They had defaulted to me as the solution without exploring alternatives. Those options take time, my mother protested finally. Time Ethan may not have. They take effort, I corrected. Effort you weren't, willing to make as long as you thought you could pressure me instead. My father's face flushed with anger. So that's it? You're turning your back on your brother? On your family? No, I said, rising to face him directly. I'm turning my back on a dysfunctional pattern that's damaged all of us. I love Ethan. I want him to receive the treatment he needs. But I won't sacrifice my future security to maintain a system that treats me as a resource rather than a person. Val stepped forward, her presence a physical reminder that I wasn't facing this confrontation alone. I think the 15 minutes are up, she noted quietly but firmly. My father looked as if he might argue, but something in my expression or Val's deterred him. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope, placing it on the coffee table with deliberate finality. Ethan wanted you to have this, he said stiffly. If we manage to find you, though I'm not sure you deserve it now. Without waiting for a response, he turned toward the door. My mother lingered a moment longer, her expression a complex mixture of anger, disappointment, and something that might have been grudging respect. You've changed, she said, echoing her earlier accusation, but with a different tone. Less condemnation, more observation. Yes, I agreed simply. I have. After they left, Val and I stood in silence, processing the intensity of the confrontation. My hands were shaking with delayed adrenaline, my breathing shallow and too fast. You okay? Val asked gently. No, I admitted, sinking back into the armchair. But I will be. My gaze settled on the envelope my father had left. Ethan's message, delivered despite his unawareness of our parents' mission. With trembling fingers, I picked it up and carefully opened it, unsure what to expect. Inside was a single sheet of paper, not a letter, but a printed confirmation page from a crowdfunding website. A campaign titled Ethan's Experimental Treatment Fund showed a current total of nearly $60,000 raised from 317 donors, with a goal of $175,000. But it was the smaller detail at the bottom of the page that caught my breath. The campaign organizer, listed as Ethan Reynolds, with a personal statement that read in part, After years of depending on my sister's generosity, I'm taking responsibility for my own care. Sarah gave me life twice, through a kidney donation and years of financial support. Now it's time for me to stand on my own. Tears blurred my vision as I handed the page to Val, who read it quickly and then looked up with a soft smile. Well, she said, it seems your brother really has been paying attention. The revelation hit me like a physical force. While my parents had been flying to Phoenix to demand more sacrifice from me, Ethan had been actively working to release me from that obligation. He had been creating an alternative solution, one that honored both his need for medical care and my need for independence. In that moment, standing in Val's sun-filled living room with the evidence of Ethan's growth in my hands, I felt the final piece of my guilt begin to dissolve. My brother didn't need me to sacrifice myself for him anymore. He was finding his own strength, his own community of support, his own path forward, just as I was. The confrontation with my parents, painful as it had provided unexpected clarity. Their desperate journey to Phoenix represented the dying gasp of an unhealthy family system, one that could only survive through my continued compliance. By holding firm to my boundaries even under intense pressure, I had demonstrated to them, and more importantly, to myself, that the old patterns no longer held power over me. I moved to the patio door, gazing out at the desert landscape that had become my sanctuary. The broken coffee mug still lay in pieces on the tile, a reminder of the shock of my parents' arrival. But beyond that small chaos, the vast Arizona sky stretched blue and limitless, promising possibilities I was only beginning to imagine. "I should clean that up," I murmured, more to myself than to Val. "We'll do it together," she replied, coming to stand beside me. That's what real support looks like, helping each other without keeping score. As we gathered the ceramic fragments together, I felt a strange sense of peace descend. Not the temporary relief of avoiding conflict, but the deeper serenity that comes from facing a difficult truth and emerging stronger on the other side. The hidden fortune that had funded my new beginning wasn't just disappearing into the past. It was actively creating a future where both Ethan and I could heal in our own ways, on our own terms, supported by people who understood the difference between sacrifice and love. 2 months after my parents' unexpected visit, Phoenix's winter revealed itself as the gentle season locals had promised. Sunny days with temperatures in the perfect mid-70s, cool evenings ideal for patio dinners, and spectacular sunsets that painted the desert sky in colors I'd never witnessed in Minnesota. My physical recovery had progressed remarkably well, with Dr. Rivera recently clearing me for normal activities within reason. "The brain heals on its own timeline," she'd reminded me during my last appointment. "You're doing exceptionally well, but don't push too hard too fast." It was advice I'd taken to heart, gradually expanding my life while respecting my body's continuing need for balance. I'd increased my remote work hours to 30 per week, enough to remain professionally engaged without triggering fatigue or headaches. I'd begun exploring Phoenix with Val as my enthusiastic guide, discovering desert botanical gardens, museums, and local restaurants that were becoming favorites. Most significantly, I'd started looking for my own apartment. Val's generosity had been boundless, but we both recognized the importance of establishing my independent life in this new city. "You're welcome to stay forever," she'd insisted when I first broached the subject. "But I get why you need your own space. Just promise you'll find something within 10 minutes of me." I'd made that promise easily, having no desire to be far from the friend who had proven herself more family than my actual family. That particular Wednesday afternoon found me alone in Val's apartment, reviewing listings from a real estate agent who specialized in helping medical recovery patients find suitable housing. I'd narrowed my options to 3 promising properties, all single level, all with minimal maintenance requirements, all within Val's specified 10-minute radius. The peaceful rhythm of my search was interrupted by an unexpected notification from my banking app. A substantial deposit had just cleared in my account. Puzzled, I opened the app to investigate, assuming some error or perhaps an insurance reimbursement I'd forgotten about. The transaction details stopped me cold. A deposit of $27,000 from Ethan Reynolds, with a memo line reading simply, "First repayment, more to follow." I stared at the screen, disbelieving. $27,000, a sum that would have seemed impossible for Ethan to access given his medical expenses and limited ability to work during treatment. Almost immediately, my phone rang, Ethan's name appearing on the screen as if summoned by my confusion. "Did you just send me $27,000? I asked without preamble. "Hello to you too," he replied, a smile evident in his voice. "And yes, I did." "Ethan, I don't understand. How? Why? You need that money for your treatment." "The treatment's covered," he said, a note of quiet pride in his tone. The crowdfunding campaign reached its goal last week. Between that, a grant from the hospital's charitable foundation, and a pharmaceutical company compassionate use program Mom and Dad finally applied for, we have enough for the procedure and follow-up care. "That's incredible," I said, genuinely thrilled for him. "But I still don't understand the money you sent me." He took a deep breath, and I could picture him gathering his thoughts. A familiar gesture from childhood whenever he approached a difficult topic. After Mom and Dad came back from Phoenix, they were different, he began. Dad was angry, Mom was upset, but something had shifted. When I found out they'd gone to pressure you for money, I was furious. We had a major confrontation. Probably the first time I've ever really stood up to them. I remained silent, letting him tell the story in his own way. I told them I was done being the reason they drained you financially, that I was taking responsibility for my own care going forward, that you'd done enough, more than enough, for 7 years. His voice grew stronger as he continued. Then, I showed them the crowdfunding page I'd already set up. I think it shocked them to realize I'd been working on a solution that didn't involve you. Good for you, I said softly, proud of his newfound assertiveness. The campaign took off in ways I never expected, he continued. People from the restaurant, from the neighborhood, from Dad's business connections, they all contributed. Some local media picked up the story, which brought in even more support. That's wonderful, Ethan, but it still doesn't explain why you sent me money. I'm getting there, he assured me. When the campaign exceeded our goal, I made a decision. Every dollar above what's needed for my treatment is going to you, repayment for all you've given over the years. This is just the first installment. I felt tears gathering, unexpected emotion closing my throat. Ethan, you don't have to repay me. That was never— I know I don't have to, he interrupted gently. I want to. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's part of my recovery too. Not just physical recovery, emotional recovery. From being dependent. From letting Mom and Dad make me the center of everyone's universe at your expense. His insight was startling, a level of self-awareness I hadn't realized he possessed. The money isn't even the most important part, he continued. It's what it represents. Me taking responsibility. Me acknowledging everything you sacrificed. Me finding a way forward that doesn't drain you anymore. I wiped away tears, overwhelmed by this evidence of my brother's growth. Growth that seemed to have accelerated in the wake of my departure, as if my absence had created space for him to develop his own strength. I don't know what to say, I admitted. You don't have to say anything. Just use it, for your new life, your apartment, whatever you need. Consider it freedom funding. Freedom funding. The phrase resonated deeply, echoing my own thoughts about my secret account that had made my escape possible. What about Mom and Dad? I asked, curious about how they had adjusted to these seismic shifts in family dynamics. Ethan sighed. They're adapting. Slowly. Dad's pride took a major hit when the community stepped up to help in ways he couldn't. Mom's still struggling with the idea that she can't control everything, especially you. But they're going to therapy. Can you believe it? Therapy? Our parents? The concept seemed impossible given their lifelong attitude toward mental health support. The hospital required it as part of the financial assistance application, he explained. Family counseling to address the systemic issues affecting patient outcomes. That's the official language. In reality, it's forcing them to confront how their expectations and behavior have affected both of us. The news was both shocking and unexpectedly hopeful. Evidence that systems could change, that patterns established over decades could be disrupted. Are they making progress? I asked cautiously. Some, Ethan acknowledged, more with the therapist than with me directly. But last week, Dad actually said he was sorry for putting so much financial responsibility on you. It wasn't a perfect apology. He still thinks you could have handled things differently. But it was something I never thought I'd hear from him. We talked for nearly an hour, sharing updates about his health, improving with pre-surgical treatments, my recovery, steady progress with fewer headaches, and our respective living situations. As we prepared to end the call, Ethan added something that caught me off guard. I might be coming to Phoenix, he said casually, if that's okay with you. For a visit? I clarified, surprised. Maybe longer. One of the specialists consulting on my case is affiliated with Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale. If the surgery goes well, he thinks I might be a good candidate for an extended treatment protocol they're developing there. The climate would be better for recovery than Minnesota winters, too. The parallels to my own situation weren't lost on me. That's remarkable, Ethan. Of course it's okay with me. More than okay. I wouldn't expect to stay with you or anything, he hastened to add. I'd find my own place, establish my own support network. I like the idea of being closer to you, of rebuilding our relationship as equals, not as caretaker and patient. Equals. The word held such promise, a vision of a sibling relationship recalibrated after years of imbalance. I'd like that too, I said, meaning it completely. After we ended the call, I sat in Val's sunny living room, absorbing the unexpected developments. The deposit notification still glowed on my phone screen, tangible evidence of a shift so profound it seemed almost miraculous. For 7 years, money had flowed in one direction, from me to my family, depleting my resources to sustain my brother's health. Now, for the first time, it had reversed course, a symbolic rebalancing that represented something far more meaningful than the actual dollars involved. When Val returned home from work, I shared Ethan's news and showed her the deposit notification. Well, damn, she said, genuinely impressed. When your brother decides to step up, he doesn't mess around. It's more than I ever expected, I admitted. Not just the money, but his self-awareness, his determination to change the pattern. Val settled onto the sofa beside me, contemplative. You know what I think? I think your leaving was the best thing you could have done, not just for yourself, but for him too. How so? By refusing to keep playing your assigned role in the family drama, you forced everyone else to reconsider their parts. Your parents had to look elsewhere for financial solutions they'd been avoiding. Ethan had to develop independence he might never have found if you'd continued enabling the situation. And you got to discover who you are beyond the perpetual provider. Her analysis was insightful, highlighting the paradoxical truth that sometimes the most supportive action we can take is to stop providing the kind of support that creates dependency. I still feel guilty sometimes, I confessed, for not being there during his treatment. You can support someone without sacrificing yourself, Val reminded me. Your brother seems to have figured that out. Maybe it's time you did too. She was right, of course. The guilt that had shadowed my first weeks in Phoenix had largely dissipated, but remnants still lingered, evidence of deeply ingrained patterns that would take time to fully unlearn. That evening, sitting on Val's patio, watching another spectacular Arizona sunset, I made a decision that felt both practical and symbolic. The $27,000 from Ethan, combined with my remaining emergency fund, provided enough for a substantial down payment on a small condo rather than renting an apartment. Permanence. Roots. Investment in a future I was choosing rather than one dictated by others' needs and expectations. I called the real estate agent and arranged to visit the properties I'd shortlisted, now with an expanded budget and adjusted parameters. Then I messaged Ethan. Money received. Thank you, though it wasn't necessary. We'll use it to buy a place with a guest room for when you come for treatment. Love you. His response came quickly. Necessary to me. Guest room sounds perfect. Love you too. The exchange was simple but profound, evidence of a healing that extended beyond my physical recovery from the aneurysm to something deeper and more fundamental. Both Ethan and I were recovering from years of unhealthy family dynamics, finding our way toward more balanced relationships and independent identities. As darkness settled over the desert landscape, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here. From Minneapolis accountant dutifully supporting her family, to Phoenix survivor reclaiming her right to self-determination. The path had been neither straight nor easy, marked by betrayal, illness, difficult confrontations, and painful choices. Yet standing at this particular crossroads, with unexpected funds flowing back to me, a brother finding his own strength, parents beginning to recognize their role in our dysfunctional patterns, and a future full of possibilities I was only beginning to explore, I couldn't regret any of it. The hidden fortune that had made my escape possible had multiplied in ways I never anticipated, not just in financial terms, but in personal growth, strengthened boundaries, authentic relationships, and newfound clarity about my own worth. As I prepared for bed that night, I pulled out the vision board I'd rescued from my Minneapolis apartment, the forgotten artifact of dreams deferred during years of family obligation. In the month since arriving in Phoenix, I'd added new images: desert landscapes, a small home with southwestern architecture, figures hiking through saguaro-dotted trails. Now I added another, a simple photograph of two people, a woman and a man, sitting on a hospital bench in sunlight, both recovering, both smiling. Siblings healing together but independently, each finding their own path forward. Tomorrow I would view potential homes, take another step toward establishing my permanent life in Phoenix. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply appreciate how far I'd already come, from fighting for my life in a Minneapolis hospital to creating a life truly worth living in the Arizona desert. The hidden fortune had funded my physical journey, but the true wealth I'd discovered was something money couldn't buy: the courage to choose myself, the wisdom to set boundaries, and the discovery that sometimes the most loving choice we can make for ourselves and others is to stop sacrificing our own well-being in ways that ultimately serve no one. 1 year after my collapse outside my Minneapolis office building, I stood on the patio of my own Phoenix condo, watching the sunrise paint the desert landscape in hues of gold and pink. My home, purchased with a combination of my emergency fund and Ethan's repayments, had become both sanctuary and symbol of my transformation. The 2-bedroom condo in a quiet complex near the Phoenix Mountains Preserve offered everything I'd needed: single-level living for my recovery period, a small but vibrant community of neighbors, and proximity to Val's apartment. Over the past 9 months, I'd gradually made it my own: Southwestern-inspired decor that reflected my new environment, a small desert garden on the patio, and a guest room that had already hosted Ethan twice during his pre-treatment consultations. As I sipped my morning coffee, I reflected on the year's journey. Not just the physical recovery from my aneurysm, which Dr. Rivera had recently pronounced remarkably complete, but the deeper healing of patterns and relationships that had been unsustainable for far too long. My professional life had stabilized into a new configuration that better supported my priorities. After 3 months of remote work for my Minneapolis firm, I'd accepted a position with a Phoenix-based financial services company, one that specialized in helping families navigate medical financial planning. My personal experience had proved surprisingly valuable in this role, allowing me to guide clients through systems I'd navigated firsthand. "We need advisors who understand these challenges beyond spreadsheets," my new director had explained during my interview. "Someone who's been in the trenches of medical financial management brings insights no degree can provide." The irony wasn't lost on me that the very experience that had nearly destroyed me financially had become an asset in rebuilding my career. Sometimes our deepest wounds, when healed, become our greatest strengths. My relationship with Ethan had evolved in ways I'd never imagined possible. His experimental surgery 6 months ago had been successful, stabilizing his kidney function and significantly reducing his medication requirements. As he'd mentioned during our life-changing phone call, his specialist had indeed recommended the follow-up treatment protocol at Mayo Clinic Scottsdale. 3 weeks ago, he'd made the move to Arizona, not as a dependent seeking care, but as an adult making a medically sound decision with independence and foresight. He'd rented an apartment near the clinic, applied for a part-time remote position that accommodated his treatment schedule, and established his own support network through patient advocacy groups. We saw each other weekly for dinner, either at my place or a restaurant halfway between our homes, building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than caretaking. Sometimes Val joined us, her straightforward personality blending surprisingly well with Ethan's quiet humor. Last week, she'd taken him hiking on an easy trail in the preserve, helping him build stamina between treatment sessions. "Your brother's pretty cool when he's not being the family medical crisis," she'd observed. Afterward, "I like the person he's becoming." So did I. Free from the suffocating dynamics that had defined our roles for so long, Ethan was discovering aspects of himself beyond the sick one, his interest in photography, his unexpected talent for Southwestern cooking, his gentle but determined advocacy for other patients navigating complex medical systems. My parents remained the most complicated aspect of this transformed landscape. Following Ethan's successful surgery and their required therapy sessions, they'd reached out cautiously, first through carefully worded emails, then brief phone calls that gradually increased in frequency and openness. 2 months ago, they had visited Phoenix, not showing up unannounced to make demands, but requesting permission with appropriate notice and staying in a hotel near Ethan's apartment. Our interactions had been tentative, layered with unresolved tensions and years of established patterns that wouldn't disappear overnight. Yet there had been moments of genuine connection. My father, walking beside me in the desert botanical garden, had offered what might have been the first sincere apology of my adult life. "I didn't see what we were doing to you," he'd admitted, studying a massive saguaro rather than meeting my eyes directly, taking and taking until there was nothing left. "That wasn't fair, Sarah. It wasn't right." The acknowledgement, while imperfect, represented growth I'd never expected from him. My mother's evolution was slower, her identity as family manager, more resistant to reconfiguration. But even she had shown glimmers of change, most notably in her interactions with Ethan. "She's learning to let me make my own medical decisions," he'd reported after their visit. "Still gives her opinion on everything, but she's accepting when I choose differently. That's progress." Progress, not perfection. A family slowly healing from dysfunctional patterns, finding new ways to connect without the toxic cycles of enabling and dependency that had defined us for so long. The most significant transformation, however, was within myself. The woman who had once measured her worth by what she could provide to others, who had depleted herself financially, emotionally, and physically to meet everyone else's needs, had learned to value her own well-being as a non-negotiable priority. I still gave to others, but from abundance rather than depletion. I'd established a small foundation that provided respite care funding for families supporting members with chronic illness, a way to ensure caregivers received the breaks they needed before reaching crisis points. I volunteered monthly at a financial literacy program for patients navigating complex medical billing systems. I'd even begun mentoring a young woman managing her mother's cancer care while trying to maintain her own career. These contributions nourished rather than drained me because they were chosen freely, bounded by limits I established and maintained, and balanced with robust self-care. The morning sun had fully risen now, warming the desert air enough that I'd soon need to move inside. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder. My friend Diane from my hiking group would be arriving soon for our weekly trek through the preserve. Diane represented another aspect of my transformed life. Friendships formed in Phoenix that had no connection to my previous roles and responsibilities. Through Val's encouragement, I'd joined a women's hiking club, a book group, and a community garden project, gradually building connections based on shared interests rather than obligation or history. As I gathered my hiking gear, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. The physical changes from a year ago were subtle but significant. Healthy color had returned to my face. The tension I'd carried for years around my eyes and mouth had softened. My posture was straighter. less defensive. But the most profound changes weren't visible on the surface. They resided in boundaries maintained, in priorities honored, in the quiet certainty that my worth extended far beyond what I could provide to others. The doorbell rang. Diane arriving for our hike, ready for the moderate trail we'd planned to tackle today. Another small milestone in my recovery, each week attempting slightly more challenging routes as my stamina continued to build. Good morning, desert dweller, she greeted me cheerfully. Ready to conquer the hidden valley loop today? Absolutely, I confirmed, shouldering my day pack with water and trail snacks. As we walked toward the trailhead, Diane updated me on her week, her daughter's college applications, her husband's job change, her ongoing renovation project. Normal life challenges navigated with the resilience of someone who hadn't experienced the seismic disruptions that had characterized my past year. Yet I found myself grateful even for those disruptions. The aneurysm that had nearly ended my life had instead catalyzed its transformation. My family's abandonment in that moment of crisis had revealed the unsustainable nature of our relationships, allowing for necessary reconstruction. Even my financial depletion had ultimately led to wiser stewardship of both material and emotional resources. The hidden fortune that had made my escape possible had been just the beginning. The true wealth I'd accumulated since arriving in Phoenix couldn't be measured in dollars. It consisted of authentic connections, hard-earned wisdom, and the profound freedom that comes from living aligned with one's own values rather than others' expectations. Halfway up the trail, we paused at a scenic overlook. The valley stretched below us, Phoenix gleaming in the distance, desert vegetation thriving in what appeared at first glance to be inhospitable conditions. Amazing what can flourish in the desert, isn't it? Diane commented, following my gaze. Plants that would die anywhere else absolutely thrive here. I know exactly what you mean, I replied, thinking not of the cacti and desert wildflowers, but of my own unexpected blooming in this landscape so different from where I'd begun. Later that evening, after a productive workday and a video call, with a new client navigating her husband's complex medical expenses, I received an unexpected email from my mother with a subject line reading, "Recognition." I opened it cautiously, still conditioned to expect demands or criticism despite months of gradually improving communication. Instead, I found something utterly unexpected. Sarah, your father, and I received an invitation today to an event honoring community members who have made significant contributions to medical support systems in the Twin Cities. The organization sponsoring it mentioned you specifically. Apparently, your years of supporting Ethan financially haven't gone unnoticed. Nor has the foundation you've established since moving to Arizona. They asked if we would accept recognition on your behalf, since you're no longer in Minnesota. I told them I would need to ask you first, something I wouldn't have thought to do a year ago. That's progress, isn't it? Whatever you decide about. The recognition. I wanted to tell you something important. I'm proud of you, Sarah. Not just for what you did for our family all those years, but for what you've done for yourself this past year. It took losing you to realize what we had in you all along. Not just financial support, but strength, wisdom, and integrity we took for granted. We're still learning how to be better parents, better people. The therapy is helping, though your father would never admit that publicly. We hope to visit again when Ethan has his next treatment evaluation, if that would be okay with you. With love and respect, both earned, Mom. The email left me momentarily speechless, the validation so unexpected and yet perfectly timed. Exactly 1 year from the day my life had irrevocably changed. I hadn't sought recognition or approval from my parents, had learned to find validation within myself instead. Yet there was healing in these words, in this acknowledgement of both what I had given and what I had become. After careful consideration, I composed a reply. Mom, thank you for asking rather than assuming. That is indeed progress, and I recognize the effort it represents. I'm grateful for your kind words about my choices, both past and present. Regarding the recognition event, I appreciate being remembered in the Minnesota medical community, but I'd prefer the focus remain on those currently doing the work there. Please decline on my behalf, with gratitude for the consideration. I would welcome a visit during Ethan's next evaluation. Perhaps we could hike in the desert preserve if you're feeling adventurous. There are trails suitable for all levels, and the landscape has a way of putting life's challenges in perspective. With love, Sarah. As I sent the email, I realized how much had changed in my ability to respond to my family. The boundaries maintained without anger, the connection offered with appropriate limits, the absence of either resentment or capitulation that had characterized so many previous interactions. That night, I added a final image to my vision board, a simple photograph of a desert plant flowering brilliantly against a rocky background. Beneath it, I wrote words that captured the essence of my journey. Thriving where planted, even when the ground isn't what you expected. The hidden fortune that had funded my escape had been depleted and replenished, transformed from emergency rescue funds to investment in a future of my own design. But the true treasure I'd discovered couldn't be quantified in financial terms. It was the liberation of living authentically, the joy of reciprocal relationships, and the quiet confidence that came from honoring my own worth as non-negotiable. 1 year after fighting for my life in a Minneapolis hospital, I wasn't just surviving, I was flourishing, much like the desert plants outside my window that turned harsh conditions into opportunities for spectacular growth. The text message that had once devastated me, "You're on your own," had become not a sentence but a starting point for the most meaningful chapter of my life. I had been on my own, and I had discovered that was exactly where I needed to be to become fully myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.